present Kenneth Williams, Clement Freud, Derek Nimmo, and Peter Jones in just a minute. And as the minute waltz fades away, here to tell you about it is our chairman, Nicholas Parsons.
Thank you. Thank you very much indeed. Hello, and welcome once again to Just a Minute. And as you've just heard, we have our 4 regular competitors of the game taking part in this particular show. And as usual, they will try and speak for just a minute on the subject they'll be given without hesitation, repetition, or deviating from that subject. But as throughout the years we've been playing this game, these 4 clever, agile, witted, brilliant, intense, wonderful characters have always criticised their chairman, and I've suffered. I thought we would make a change today, and we're going to invite one of them to become chairman, and I'm courageously, I think very courageously, going to sit in their seat and try and play the game. And this week, we're going to ask Clement Freud to cross the floor of the House of Just a Minute and sit here, and I will take his place.
Well, welcome to Get Your Own Back Week. We'll start with Derek, and the subject is making a sausage roll. Starting now.
Well, Nicholas Parsons does remind me of a sausage roll, as Mr. Clement Freud has very wisely pointed out, because he's fat and podgy and has a rather twisty interior.
Nicholas, you have another false
I don't
challenge.
think I am fat and podgy, and if you think I am, I ask you to put it to the audience so that they can be the judges of whether I'm fat and podgy.
This is a false challenge by Nicholas, who will be last this week. Derek, you have another point, and
But
you
I've
have...
improved it. Even the audience approved it. When I, as chairman, put it to the audience, we always bow
Nicholas,
to
you
their
lose
superior
another
judgment.
point. Nobody gets it. It's just -1 to Nicholas.
And
Derek, you keep the subject, and you have 37 seconds starting now.
Raspberry jam is an ideal thing to put in.
Nicholas.
I think the chairman was deviating. I thought he was deviating on raspberry jam, but actually he's established he was going to put it into his sausage roll, which I think is the most devious thing to do anyway.
Mr. Chairman, is he allowed to challenge with his so irresponsibly?
It will be cut out in the program, don't worry.
We
Derek,
never edit in just a
Derek,
minute.
you have 35 seconds starting now.
Go down to Safeways or Waitrose, somewhere like that, and buy some ready-made pastry. Awfully good idea. Sainsbury's have it too, as you've probably seen it in Marks and Spencer's. And when you've got this, take it home, put it on the table, take a couple of sausages, nice ones, old bangers, pop them in, roll them round, into the oven, and then you bring them out. And gosh, they're good. Take them with mustard. I like them very much. Salt and pepper, and then give one to Nicholas Parsons, because he's got a lean and hungry look. What?
Repetition of... I'm actually very nervous of challenging, because you've
Quite
already
right.
told me I'm not going to get any points in this particular program. But he did say Nicholas Parsons before.
Well, yes, he did. And Nicholas Parsons has now achieved parity. And gets the subject.
Kenneth, would you like to come out for a drink?
No, we've got to stay.
Nicholas, you have the subject. You have 13 seconds on making a sausage roll starting now.
One of the most difficult things to do is make a sausage roll, because they're usually curved. And if you don't cook them first, it's even more impossible. Put them at the top of an incline and see how far they will roll down to the bottom. If you stay... Do I lose a point for speaking when the whistle went?
And the score now is Derek has 3 points. Nicholas has none because he lost one through. And the next subject is Peter's, and it is Forewords, and you have 60 seconds starting now.
Forward books are very similar to introductions and prefaces and appreciations.
Kenneth.
Hesitation.
Rubbish.
Introductions and,
He did, yes, I'm his chairman. I listened, and he hesitated, definitely. Kenneth should have the subject.
Kenneth, it's a very good challenge, and no. Peter, Forewords, and you have 55 seconds starting now.
Groucho Marx was asked to write one for a friend who'd written a book, and he put down, I appreciate whatever the author's name was.
Derek, you have a challenge.
Whatever that repeat.
You're
Yes.
absolutely right. You have 4 words, and you have 45 seconds starting now.
Forwards are something that you're asked to write for other people's books, and they never give you any money for doing them. It's very boring. They have to do one. Oh.
Kenneth,
a hesitation.
you're right. A point. Forwards, 40 seconds now.
They should give you some idea of what's in store. And in the Victorian era, they were notable for having little chapter headings and things. And in the foreword, it was explained the general scheme of the thing, so to speak.
Repetition of things.
No, he said theme before. I was listening to him.
Thank you, yeah.
Said theme before and thing this time.
Yeah. What a cheek. Outrageous.
But you see, Clement
Mr.
wants
Chairman,
to win.
may we hear more from the chairman and less from the shadow chairman?
Kenneth, you keep the subject, 24 seconds starting now.
And the best way to write a foreword is to familiarize yourself with the subject under discussion.
Nicholas Parsons.
I would say there was hesitation.
I would agree.
Right.
You have the subject. You have 17 seconds starting now.
The best 4 words that I think of are sex, food, money, and power. And if you think of what these 4 words represent, you will realize they are probably the most emotive qualities in any human nature.
Kenneth, you challenge the
Yes, because
repetition
you've
of
got that
things.
4 words, and this is forward, which is one word. It's not F-O-U-R, and then another one. This is one word, forward.
Kenneth, you buzzed for repetition of think, and you're quite right.
Yes, I meant repetition of think. That's right. Yes, I did.
You get the subject. You have 3 seconds starting now.
And the best way to do it is to make it really...
Derek, you
And
challenge.
the best way, repetition and the best
You're
way.
right. You have 1.5 seconds starting now.
Ubiquitous, obsequious, but.
At the end of that round, Derek is in the lead. Peter hasn't as yet done terribly well score-wise. Kenneth is okay. Nicholas, you have the next subject. It is roses starting now.
Roses, what a marvellous subject to begin my first turn on Just a Minute. Paul Scarlett, a rambler rose.
It's also your last term on Just a Minute.
Peter, you get a point. Nicholas, you may go on now.
Rambler roses should be pruned in the autumn. Albertine, one of the fastest growing, is a fine specimen. The same with climbing roses. A mermaid comes to mind. What a joy to behold. Peace is one of my favourites, with its delicate fragrance, beautiful petals, and huge blooms. Also the most disease-resistant. One mustn't forget also the floribundas, bush roses, hybrid teas. These should be dealt with in the spring and given a good mulch with cow manure. If you can't get that, then horse or pig is equally good. The names of roses are endless. Mojave, Specs Yellow, Wendy Cousins, Superstar, The Admiral, Opera, Montezuma, Grandmere Jenny, Grandpa Dixon, Ena Harkness. Wheatcroft, he produces some marvellous roses. And if you want to have a really fantastic day out, go and visit Queen Mary's Rose Garden in Regent's Park during the summer in the June and see the beautiful blooms that cascade around there.
Repetition of beautiful.
No, I said bloom before, and I said
beautiful,
blooms this time.
beautiful, you said twice.
Derek,
You said twice.
I let Nick go on a bit because he seemed to know a little about roses. Actually, the whistle should have blown about 5 minutes ago. Nicholas gets a point.
At last!
And is lying in close second place. And Kenneth, you start the next round, and your word is marbles, starting now.
One of the marvels of the modern world is in this very studio today. Yes, you have guessed. It is, of course, none other than the Bloomsbury bombshell himself. Kenneth, put him on your mantelpiece. William. This is a particularly marvellous specimen of a marvel. And I have been marvelled at, and they've cried out, what a cult figure! We've never seen such a cult before. And...
Nicholas Parsons.
Repetition of cult. A
No,
figure.
cult figure is a hyphen.
Thank you, thank you, thank you.
Kenneth, you have...
He's evil, isn't he?
It's a hyphen.
I would hate to be one of your constituents, I really would. Because if you treat them like you treat me...
You haven't got enough money to live in his constituency.
Kenneth, you have 25 seconds On marbles, starting now.
Another marvel is, of course, that incredible structure, the Humber Bridge. I went and stood in amazement at the pylons supporting that so delicate-looking and yet such a tough affair. I said to the man in charge, how much is it, Cross? And he said £1. I said, is that each?
Nick.
He said 3 or 4 times.
Yes, he did.
He said, I said.
You get the subject. You have 4 seconds. Marbles, starting now.
One of the marvels of our generation must undoubtedly be Kenneth Williams. A man...
I'm afraid that puts Nicholas Parsons in the lead. He is just ahead of Kenneth Williams and Derek Nimmo, with Peter in honourable 4th place. And, Derek, you start the next subject. It is saddling a horse. You have 1 minute, starting now.
Saddling a horse. Well, the most difficult part about saddling a horse is actually catch the horse, because one has to go out into a field and find the wretched thing, and they never come over to you very willingly. I don't know about you, but they are the most stupid animals. For something so beautiful, they are incredibly silly. Anyway, having...
Peter, you challenge.
That's ridiculous. There's nothing silly about a horse trying to avoid being saddled. It's not a natural thing for the horse to have done to it. It would much rather remain in the field, unsaddled, wouldn't it, roaming about?
Go on a bit.
He's talking absolute rubbish.
Go on a
Don't you
bit.
think?
Talk me into it.
Anyway, it would be in a stable to start with, wouldn't it?
Right. We don't allow that challenge, do we?
No.
Right. Derek, you have another 46 seconds, starting now.
If you're hunting with the Bicester or the Oakley or the Pytchley or the Beaufort, then one would use an English saddle. And having obtained your...
Nick Parsons.
Repetition of find. Right at the beginning, he said, first of all, you have to find your horse, and one of the most difficult things is to find it.
You don't have to go on.
Oh, right.
He's much quicker on the uptake than you see.
No, I just thought I'd let you go on a bit, to be
Nick,
fair,
you
play
are
the
right,
game, and I knew
and
I
you
wouldn't
have
get a point, even if it was a correct challenge.
Nicholas, you are right, and you have 33 seconds, starting now.
Well, to find your horse in the field, you can always attract him with a little sugar. Having put a morsel over his head...
Derek, you challenge.
Hesitation.
Desperately.
Well, I'm in a desperate situation here. I mean, the first time
you have the
him as
subject.
chairman, I mean, what chance
Nick,
have I
will
got?
you please?
Oh, Kenneth, it's so difficult, isn't it?
Makes you vomit, doesn't it?
That's the next subject.
Derek, you have an extra point for good observation. You also have 27 seconds, starting now.
If you're getting a Mexican saddle, they're rather useful because they have a little thing in front of which you can hold on to. And gosh, sometimes you need it, don't you? I do, because I find it terribly easy to fall off. In fact, I'd once saddled a horse...
Pete Jones, you challenge.
Repetition of find.
Yes, right. You have the subject. You have 15 seconds, starting now.
Well, the thing to do, of course, is to arrange beforehand for the groom to be holding the horse in the stable. And then you take the saddle off its hook on the wall, and you place it on top of the horse's back. And giving the horse a bit of sugar or something, you...
Peter, you have a point for speaking when the whistle went. Derek is now 1 point ahead of Nicholas. Kenneth is 1 point ahead of Peter. And there's not a great deal in it. Or wouldn't be if I could read Ian Messiter's writing. And Peter, you have the next subject, and it's concentration. You have 60 seconds, starting now.
Well, that's one of the great qualities that you really need to be able to play this game. Unfortunately, I always find that it's in conflict with the natural way of emphasizing things, which is repetition, or possibly, even to make things more interesting, deviating. So, really, the actual style...
Nick,
I would have interpreted that as hesitation.
but you're not chairman. I am. I don't.
I know, that's why I was
Peter,
so
you have
tentative
another
in putting
39
my
seconds,
challenge
starting
forward.
now.
Some people are able to do this by staring very hard at the head of a pin. But I do feel that this probably tends to make their conversation more boring than it normally would be if they were concentrating perhaps on the subject, even though it is ostensibly boring.
Derek Nimmo.
Repetition of boring.
Right. 20 seconds, starting now.
Concentration is something that schoolmasters always claim that your children have not got. And really it means that they drift off in class because the master might be terribly boring, lacks concentration. I have read this many times on every one of the aforementioned bits of paper.
Nicholas, this is your great chance to shine. And the subject for you for 1 minute is mussels, and you may start now.
Mussels are what we're all blessed with, and I think it's our duty to keep them in good shape. Sometimes when I strip off, people say, he's in fine nick. They are making a pun.
Derek, you challenge.
Sometimes they say, what a wreck of a man.
As long as they don't say, what a wreck of a woman, what's it matter?
Nick, you may keep the subject. You have 48 seconds starting now.
Some people like to overdevelop their muscles. These people go in for contests such as Mr. Atlas, and they ripple these great things on their body, and they cover them with oil and other unguents, and sometimes I think they look somewhat unattractive.
Derek, you challenge.
The other kind of muscles are...
You're quite right. Nick, you've had a challenge. You've repeated sometimes. Derek has the subject.
What a mean challenge.
He also has 37 seconds starting now.
I love mussels. I go down to collect them quite often, particularly when I'm staying at Portsheads in Port Phillip Bay in Australia. And I've got a very nice chum there called Viola Tate, the widow of Sir Frank. And she has mussels growing on her little pier. I hasten to explain he was a knight, not a peer of the realm. But,
repetition of pier.
Nick, you're right. You have the subject back. 20 seconds starting now.
Mussels from the sea with which moule marinière is made are one of the delicacies. A soup that a lot of people enjoy tremendously. I would not say it's something that I would automatically choose if I went into a restaurant, because the black shells...
Derek.
No, he wouldn't, because it's too expensive for him.
Doesn't matter whether
he might if I was paying.
I think you get a point for being accurate.
For rudeness, a point for rudeness, an insult.
And Nick, you lose a point for arguing. But you do get the subject back. You have 7 seconds starting now.
They are black on the outside, the shells, and when they are prized open, the little pink interior is quite a delicacy.
Derek is still just in the lead. Nicholas is second. Kenneth, who is about to speak, will improve his position. And your subject is Athens. You have 60 seconds starting now.
When I was in that fair city, I was taken to the Agora, where all those wonderful old Stoic philosophers used to hold forth to the numerous people who were gathered about to hear the wisdom. And I was taken to another place.
He was taken twice. Repetition of taken.
He does get taken a bit, doesn't he?
I wanted to hear Kenneth.
Derek, you're right. Kenneth will doubtless get the subject back, but for the time being, it's yours. You have 42 seconds starting now.
In the placard, during Mardi Gras, that is the time to be there. Gosh, what an excitement. I met this beautiful girl in a domino.
You don't actually have a Mardi Gras in the Plaka in Athens. The Mardi Gras takes place in South American countries and Latin countries.
Nicholas, you're wrong. A Mardi Gras is a day. It takes place all over the world.
Nick,
you keep the subject.
I know I'm going to lose all the points
Nicholas,
I've got, so I may
you lose a point for arguing. Derek, you go on. You have 33
Sitting
seconds.
on Sophocles'
Derek,
mountain.
you have 33 seconds starting now.
Sitting on Sophocles' mountain, looking across at the kites that fly on the first day of Lent. That must be one of the most astonishing sights you could ever witness, because the whole of the air of Athens is ablaze with these wonderful things floating in the wind, with eagles amongst them, and hawks, and gosh, what?
Hesitation.
Peter Jones.
Hesitation. He said and hawks.
If he had said and hawks, which he didn't, it would have been repetition.
Yes, I thought it was.
Derek, you have the subject. Starting now.
One of the great benefactors, I think, is Lord Elgin, who brought those wonderful marbles back to England. A lot of people don't realize...
Repetition of wonderful.
Yes, he did say wonderful
right.
before. Peter, you have the subject, and not very long. Starting now.
Athens is the Edinburgh of the South. And it's one of the most attractive cities that I've never visited. I'm always hoping...
Peter, you have now shot up to share second place with Nicholas Parsons, and Kenneth is still in fourth place. Derek, you have the next round, and you begin with jokers. 60 seconds, starting now.
Well, you know, old Peter Jones is rather a joker. I mean, to come out with a remark like that, Athens is the Edinburgh of the South, I think that's really witty, don't you? Because I never quite know why that particular Scottish city is always compared to fair Athena, because I find it rather...
Nicholas.
It's a repetition of city. Edinburgh is a city, the city of the South, and that fair city.
Yes, not a very bright challenge.
No, he didn't say it's the city of the South.
Since we start analysing challenges, Nick, you have the subject, you have 42
I
seconds.
didn't say city the first
No, he
time.
didn't. No.
Yes, he did.
Yes, he did.
I
He
was
said
listening
city
very
twice.
carefully because I hoped he was going to go on talking about me.
Well, you weren't listening carefully enough. Nicholas, starting now.
I don't know what's the subject. You haven't told me. You haven't told me the subject.
Derek,
Deviation.
absolutely right.
Oh, come on. I don't know what the subject is and told them to begin. We talk about lift shafts coming through. No, that is very mean, Mr. Freud. I'm sorry. I must state my point. I put it to the audience. Wasn't it mean?
I do not...
No, you can't keep putting things to the audience all the
Yes.
time.
It's only the chairman that could do
Anyway,
that.
he's way out in the lead.
What
Why
I want to
wouldn't
know
he
is,
win?
you get more money for being chairman, because Nicholas Parsons does, doesn't he?
Yes, I'm doing this for the money, you're quite right.
How
But
much more do you get?
What is crucial is that Nicholas Parsons gets less money for doing this.
For being on the panel. Have you had a reduction, Nicholas?
Well, yes, every time I speak, I lose a point.
Derek, you have jokers. You have 40 seconds starting now.
Nicholas Parsons is really the joker in the pack, isn't he? Look at him. What fun that man is. He's what is known as an old card, isn't he? That's why they call him the Joker, which I think is quite tolerably amusing. There was a wonderful man called Joe Miller who wrote The Vade Mecum, which was a collection of...
Nicholas Parsons.
A hesitation.
Yes, he did. You have the subject. It is jokers.
Good.
You have 24 seconds starting now.
Four of the finest jokers I know must be on the panel of Just a Minute. Derek Nimmo, Kenneth Williams, and Peter Jones.
Derek,
Hesitation, he couldn't remember the leading joker, Peter Jones.
you're quite right.
All right, my dear fellow, I've already said that.
17 seconds starting now.
When you see a joker, you don't always recognize him at first because he might be wearing a long Macintosh. Have you ever thought about that? I bet you haven't. Or a bowler hat. And you might see from a distance this creature coming towards you, and you might think, this chap is not a joker. But he is.
Nicholas?
He said, you might, 3 times. You might think, you might see.
I suppose he did.
Yeah.
You've got half a second starting now.
Jokers wild, jokers in the pack.
That great flurry of points brings Nicholas a long way behind Derek, but quite a long way in front of Peter, and even further in front of Kenneth. And Peter has the next round, and begins with things I cut out of magazines, starting now.
Well, mostly recipes, I suppose, particularly if they're written by Clement Freud, so that I shan't become terribly envious of his amazing culinary prowess in...
Kenneth?
Hesitation.
Yes.
I was going to say several very nice things.
If I give you the subject, I hope you will continue in the sort of vein in which Peter started. In that case, you may start now.
Things I cut out of magazines are about myself, and I immediately paste them into a great book with suitable annotations underneath and appellations notwithstanding. I also cut out certain pictures which I think are suggestive. Now, I don't want you to imagine that I'm in any way prurient. Far be it from me to have that sort of thing applied to a name unsullied by any kind of ignoble act. I have been known to cut out things like... I was trying to think of the things that say, British summertime. I couldn't make it in time.
Derek Nimmo, you have the subject. You have 7 seconds starting now.
Things I cut out of magazines are pictures of roses, particularly one which is called Derek Nimmo. And it has a little thing underneath it saying not...
That point to Derek Nimmo brings us to the end of the round, also to the end of the game. Let me tell you the result in reverse order. Kenneth Williams was in the most reverse order. Peter was 1 in front of him, Nicholas 1 in front of him, and this week's winner is Derek Nimmo. We shall be playing this game again next week when, with luck, we shall have a chairman of sanity, wit, and brevity. If we're unlucky, we have Nicholas Parsons. Thank you for coming, thank you for listening, and I hope you'll be with us again next week when Just a Minute takes the air. Goodbye.
The chairman of Just a Minute was Clement Freud. The programme was devised by Ian Messiter and produced by Pete Atkin. We present Kenneth Williams, Derek Nimmo, Peter Jones and Brian Johnston in Just a Minute. And as the minute waltz fades away, here to tell you about it is our chairman, Nicholas Parsons.
Thank you very much. Hello and welcome to Just a Minute. And once again, they're going to try and talk on the subject that I give them without hesitation, repetition, or deviating from that subject. Let us begin the show this week with Peter Jones. Peter, the subject is telephone answering machines. Will you tell us something about those in Just a Minute, starting now?
Yes, well, I'm rather embarrassed to have to admit this publicly, but I don't have a butler. Now, I'm sorry if this should destroy the illusions that my public has of me, but in lieu of this, I have got a telephone answering machine, which records a simple message, which I have made myself personally on the tape provided, which says briefly that I'm not available to speak in person because I'm out or indisposed, lying drunk in bed. I don't know. Any particular reason it could be. I don't like it when I phone other people and they have a telephone answering machine.
Brian Johnston.
He said phone before, about quarter of an hour ago.
Telephone is...
not telephone, he said phone.
That's
Yes.
why I said telephone before, you see.
Oh, well, if you said telephone before, you've said it again now, so that's twice.
No, I
but
didn't. I said
telephone...
phone this time.
Brian, you haven't played the game as often as the others.
No, I know.
Repeat
You're not
this-
likely to, going on at this rate, Brian.
Oh, it all comes out. Even the guests get no mercy. So, Brian, an incorrect challenge. Pete, another point. And telephone answering machines, 6 seconds, starting now.
Shops will tell you that there's nobody there to speak to you if you want to order something, and I don't...
When Ian Messiter blows his whistle, it tells us that 60 seconds is up, and whoever is speaking at that moment gains an extra point. It was Peter Jones who also began the subject and gained points during it. He is not only in the lead at the end of that round, he's the only person to have any points. Derek Nimmo, will you take the next round? The subject is carpetbaggers. There are 60 seconds as usual, starting now.
Carpetbaggers were so named because after the American Civil War, when the North beat the South, they used to go from the top part of the country further down, carrying with them these carpet bags, which they had all their possessions within, and tried to secure some of the most influential jobs in that part of the United States. And this then became a name.
Peter Jones, a chance.
Hesitation.
That, I would say, was a hesitation. Yes, Peter. A point to you. 30 seconds on carpetbaggers, starting now.
They didn't have any money, they couldn't afford proper portmanteaus or suitcases, and so they fashioned these carpet bags out of bits of old flooring material made of wool or cotton, whatever. Sometimes they were quite attractive. A lot of sewing went into them. Their mothers and wives were engaged on the needlework of this project for a long time, and when they were ready, they filled them with various articles, which they put in and traveled.
Peter Jones is starting in fine style after his success of a few weeks ago. But we have a different audience, I must explain. Peter actually won a few weeks back. He's come back with new adrenaline, and here he is, not only still in the lead, but still the only person with any points.
Same old me, apart from the adrenaline.
Kenneth Williams, will you take the next subject? It is variety. 60 seconds starting now.
How blue was in Variety, and he used to come on and say, I've been in the electric cafe. I go there because the food's so shocking. Well, I always laughed at those jokes. And Nellie Wallace said, I'm a young man at the stage door, always holds me purse, says the change does him good. Well, the Variety place was full of these distinguished artists, and I deplore the fact that we haven't got them with us today to enliven the proceedings as they always did. Variety, someone once said, was the spice of life, unlike the condiments which you would see on a table. They said it gave a flavour of piquancy, if you like. And, of course, Variety is in...
Derek Nimmo,
Tradition of course.
So, Derek, you've got in now with 4 seconds to go. Variety starting now.
Max Miller, that great comedian, used to say, when roses are red, they're ready for plucking.
Well, I'm glad that Derek Nimmo didn't finish that little rhyme of Max Miller's, because we might have been back to the Limerick situation a few weeks ago. Derek, you were speaking as the whistle went, gained an extra point. You're in second place, and Kenneth has a point. Brian Johnston has yet to score, and he begins the next round. And the subject is great moments. I'm sure you have some to tell us about. Can you do it in the game starting now?
I don't want to sound boastful, but I have had some great moments in my life. I've been lucky.
Peter Jones has challenged.
He's beginning to sound boastful.
What we like to do on this occasion is to give Peter a bonus point for a good challenge, but Brian gets one for being interrupted, and he keeps the subject of great moments with 55 seconds starting now.
Because I have been able to see things like the coronation, funerals, weddings, cricket matches.
Peter Jones has challenged.
4 hesitations.
Hesitation. I was just making a list.
For each of these events.
I know he did, but he hasn't...
Well, you know he did, right. Well, that's all. As long as you know he did, it's all right.
But he hasn't played the game as often as you and the others, and
you keep saying that. I don't know.
You're way out in the lead.
I mean, old Williams here goes far slower than that. You let him go on.
Well, he doesn't pause in between his slow.
Old. Yes, thank God, I'm old. You're going to stand there and see?
I'm not, I'm sitting. Oh, she was me, you're blind as well.
Oh, I thought, yes, it's that table. It was very...
Right, well, Brian, we're with you still on 45 seconds, and the subject is great moments starting now.
One of the greatest moments that I've had was at the Oval in 1953, when England regained the Ashes after 19 years. Dennis Compton was batting, Arthur Morris was bowling, and he bowled off breaks over the wicket, left hand, which is the other word for a Chinaman. And the batsman to whom I referred with initials DCS swept the ball towards the gasometer.
Derek Nimmo challenge.
Preposition of ball.
Yes, you did mention that Brian Morris had the ball.
Too many balls.
Too much. I often speak it like that.
Yeah. And there are 19 seconds for Derek on great moments starting now.
A great moment in my life was when Dame Anna Neagle received her DBE. We didn't know about it in the country that I was in. It was a play called Charlie Girl, and suddenly one read in the newspaper that this great award had been given to this most noble and gracious lady.
Peter Jones a challenge.
Repetition.
Of what?
Well, aren't you listening?
shamelessly, I want to know whether you are. What was the word?
Lady.
Yes,
Lady.
thank you very much. You're correct. There are 2 seconds on great moments starting now.
I was stuck in the BBC lift with a lady whose name...
You see, Peter, it can be, when Dennis Compton was repeated, it could be that you come out with the wrong challenge as Derek did. That's why I have to ask you.
Ah, yes, I see.
But I liked your response.
Well, thank you very
Very
much.
witty, yes. You're still in the lead, by the way.
Of course, I haven't been playing it as long as you've been chairman. I've only been doing it for only years.
But it's affected your hair more than mine. In other words,
Did you hear that? That great corpulent oaf saying things like that about Peter Jones?
I think it's most uncalled for.
So do I, Kevin.
I mean, a poor man labouring there and all the difficulties he's labouring under anyway.
repetition.
And you must remember that I have to play the game with you. You only have to play it with me.
They're working that one out, Peter. I had to play with all of you. There are all 4 of you up against it. So, anyway, we are now going to continue with... oh, yes, who's going to begin? Peter Jones, it's your turn to begin. The subject is egg-on-face occasions. Will you tell us something about those in the game starting now?
Well, of course, I've had a number of these over a long and successful career. I've appeared in the wrong clothes and made the wrong speech.
And Derek Nimmo challenge.
Wrong.
There are 51 seconds for you on egg-on-face occasions starting now.
Well, one of the most egg-on-face occasions that I ever heard about was when Peter Jones was coming down a lift at the BBC with this lady, because he took it that she was inviting him to do a little bit of you-know-what, and she wasn't at all, so that's why he got Earth's Soul of Visage very heavily in that particular BBC machine. But the worst thing that ever happened to me, I must tell you about it, because I think you'll be quite fascinated, as a matter of fact. It was quite a few years ago. I think I was 3.5 at the time. And I was standing on a beach, and a fellow came up to me and showed me one of those little McGill postcards. I don't know whether, perhaps I ought to ask someone I can tell you, but I did have egg on my face when I saw what was written underneath. Because there was a line which I thought was quite witty, although rather eggy. I must confess that, because Humpty Dumpty was on the front of it.
Derek Nimmo was saved by the whistle again before he went over and told us one of those rude jokes. Derek, you crept forward. You're 1 ahead of Brian Johnston. You're 2 behind our leader, Peter Jones, and Kenneth is still in a commanding 4th place. Derek, it's your turn to begin. The subject is sandstorms. Can you tell us something about that in the game starting now?
They really are singularly terrifying. The first time that I was caught in a sandstorm, I was travelling from Sharjah up through a wadi across to Khor Khan. I saw in the far distance a cloud no bigger than a man's hand, which assumed enormous proportions, and I saw coming towards me this vast quantity of sand. I got off my camel, it was a thing to do, and crept down behind it. Wilfred Thesiger had taught me to do this personally, so I knew exactly what was required. I took my burnous off, wrapped it around my head, put a little water on it, and waited for the sand to pass over. Now, it took some, I would say 25 minutes before the worst of this Savara... No,
It doesn't matter. The whistle went before you got to the Zavara. And, Brian, you've moved forward, but you're still 1 behind Peter Jones, our leader, 1 ahead of Derek Nimmo in 3rd place. Kenneth Williams is in 4th place, and he's now taking the next subject, which is keeping my figure. Don't laugh, he has a beautiful little diminutive figure there. Beautifully marked, beautifully shaped, and uses it very effectively on the stage. There are 60 seconds on that subject starting now.
Well, I have met people who say they find great difficulty in keeping their figure. I reply, dieting is no good whatsoever. Reject it utterly.
There is only one way to deal with this situation, and it is not by...
...of just a minute, and was speaking as the whistle went, gained a point for that, and also a no bonus point for not being interrupted. Alas, he's still in 4th place. But he gives great value for money. Brian Johnston, you begin the next round. The subject is things I make lists of. And there are 60 seconds, as usual, starting now.
I make lists of a great many things. When you get to my age, you do forget. And so I have a little book in my pocket, and each morning I write down the things which I have to do during the day. Sometimes it's shopping, sometimes it's people I have got to... sometimes...
Oh, I'm sorry. Sometimes.
I mean, I haven't played...
Sometimes.
No.
60 seconds for Derek Nimmo to talk about things I make lists of. I'm so sorry.
How can he have 60 seconds?
Why are you penalising
him? With 60 seconds, and this bloke's had to go. So there must have been some time used up. How can there now be 60 seconds? It makes no sense.
It doesn't make any sense at all. The sense is that I made a mistake.
Oh,
I am human.
But it is so unusual.
Oh, you never know where you are in this game with these
It's the
fellows.
first time for everything, Kenneth.
There are 46 seconds left, and Derek has the subject, things I make lists of, starting now.
If I'm in...
Hesitation.
I think that time you really didn't get started. No, Kenneth, I agree. You have... There's more than a second.
I think that's a bit harsh.
No, it's not. He's the chairman. Nobody's better judged.
Well, I think it is.
Well, I can see on the watch that EMS it's more than a second before he started.
Wasn't more than a second.
It's there.
You mumble on so much, I never know when you're going to say start.
Well, I think you know the game sufficiently well to get it. And you're usually cracking like that anyway. Kenneth, I agree you have a hesitation there. 44.5 seconds on things I make lists of, starting now.
I make lists of all those delightful people. Derek Nimmo, I put right at the top because he has such fanciful flights of imaginative delight. I sit enthralled when he...
Derek Nimmo, chance.
Repetition of I. We're playing a really tough game tonight.
Well, you can't make a list of Derek Nimmo.
But you didn't challenge, Peter.
He may have a list, but he isn't one.
He may be at the top of the list, but you didn't challenge. It was Derek who challenged. And Kenneth still has the subject and 31 seconds on things I make lists of.
Are you saying he didn't say I
I put down the Impressionists. After all, one thinks in terms of Degas, Caravaggio, and my dear old Gatrino. So called because, you know, it means squint-eyed. And his real name, Francesco Barbieri, is Frank Barber, which doesn't sound at all interesting as opposed to the foreign version. Rather like Jose Moreno, a lot better than Joe Brown. But on the other hand, you see, we're very effective.
Derek Nimmo.
Repetition of you see.
Yes, you did say you see before, yes. I thought you were going to have him for deviation. He's got away from
really?
lists of...
Well, I thought you weren't going to give me a point at all, so I'm really quite pleased the way it's turned out.
Derek, you have a correct challenge, and you have 3 seconds for things I make lists of, starting now.
Radishes, sausages, turnips and peas, greens and johns and beans and...
Well, Derek Nimmo was speaking as the whistle went and has now taken the lead, but the scoring situation is very interesting. There's only 1 point separating each of them in this order. Derek Nimmo, Peter Jones, Brian Johnston, and then Kenneth Williams. Peter Jones, your turn to begin. The subject is a much-needed invention. Will you tell us something about that in just a minute, starting now?
I'd like some kind of invention to stop me repeating myself or hesitating, let alone deviating from the subject. If it could be an electronic impulse which just fitted under my arm or some other place in my body and gave me a little twinge when I was about to do this, then I might easily be able to speak more fluently and with some kind of oratoric...
Kenneth Williams.
I think his deviation. He speaks beautifully and most fluently. I think to say that he doesn't speak fluently is deviation.
But he didn't say that. He said he would like to speak then more. He would speak more fluently.
Well, I think that's impossible. Nobody could speak more fluently than Peter Jones.
Well,
Peter Jones not only speaks fluently, he speaks so mellifluously, it's so easy on the ear. People say, if only I could hear more of that Peter Jones.
Have you been sniffing glue?
His nose is naturally that shape. Peter, you did say that you could speak more fluently, so Kenneth's challenge is incorrect. You keep the subject, a much-needed invention. There are 37.5 seconds starting now.
Also something to wake one up quietly and gently in the morning, not as fiercely and as vulgarly as an alarm clock or even buzzer, and not music either. I think something that would be...
Derek Nimmo shall. Hesitation, yes, Derek. You have the subject with 21.5 seconds, a much-needed invention starting now.
Well, I tell you what I think is a much-needed invention. Some kind of little device you can pop onto your back and so you can fly personally. Don't want aeroplanes, great big helicopters, things like that. Some wonderful...
Kenneth Williams. There were two sums, yes, there were, Kenneth. Well, listen, 10 seconds are left. A much-needed invention starting now.
It should be one which, when you press the grapefruit, results in any squirts being determined away from you. I didn't know what quite to say there. I meant divert.
Having now been on the panel of Just a Minute, I know what it's like. You see, the word comes in. He wanted diverted, but it didn't come out. It came out as determined, doesn't it?
I mean, my agony was visible to all. I was left omelette surly visage.
Yeah. So, Kenneth, you've leapt forward. You're one ahead of Brian Johnston, one behind Peter Jones, and two behind our leader, Derek Nimmo, who begins the next round. The subject, Casablanca. Will you tell us something about that subject, Derek, starting now?
So after this terrible sandstorm, my camel arrived in Casablanca, and I took out my rosary beads and crossed myself and thanked the good Lord for allowing me to survive the terrible hardships I'd undergone before I reached Casablanca. And then I wandered into a rather pretty little bar where there was some unusually effete and sensitive Englishman sitting there, wrapped in long dashes, which, as you know, is a sort of robe that people tend to wear in that part of the...
This point for a delightful challenge. Also, Derek Nimmo, a point for being interrupted. He keeps the subject. There are 13 seconds on Casablanca starting now.
They made a very good film called Casablanca, which starred the late Humphrey Bogart and Ingrid Bergman, and he was supposed to have said within this film, "Play it again, Sam." I don't know whether that is absolutely correct.
Well, at the end of that round, getting an extra point for speaking as the whistle went, Derek Nimmo has increased his lead, but he's only two ahead of Peter Jones, and Kenneth Williams begins the next round, and the subject is asteroids. Will you tell us something about those in the game starting now?
These are electrons, meteors, sometimes they're also called stars. Like me, I twinkle, and when I arrive in France, they always say, "Oh, vous êtes enchanté, Estorillon." I think it's very nice to be greeted in that fashion. Asteroids go across the sky. It was, in fact, a great astronomer who said, "Shooting stars go across the skies at night." Like the oral tradition, that is to say, they are gone once they have been seen, and that the written tradition stays forever.
Nimmo challenge.
Two traditions.
Yes, you talked about tradition before. Sorry, Kenneth, and congratulations on the way you wriggled out of the sky in the skies. I thought that was superb. There are 16 seconds on asteroids with Derek starting now.
When I first met Kenneth Williams, he said to me, "I thought that I have got the most terrible asteroids." It wasn't, in fact, what he said, but I was for a long time rather puzzled, and I looked it up in the dictionary, and I found it was these little minor stars that went around the solar system.
Derek Nimmo saved by the whistle once again. Shooting all over the place, I have no doubt. We've now reached the end of this particular contest and game, and Brian Johnston, who came back from his previous triumphs, finished in fourth place, only 1 point behind Kenneth Williams, who gave such excellent value as usual. He was 2 points behind Peter Jones, who was excellent and outstanding as ever. And way out in the lead was that superlative player of the game, the one and only Derek Nimmo. And we do hope you've enjoyed this edition of Just a Minute, enjoyed listening to it as much as we've enjoyed playing it, and we'll be tuning in again when Just a Minute once more takes to the air and we all play this delightful game. Till then, from all of us here, goodbye.
The chairman of Just a Minute was Nicholas Parsons. The programme was devised by Ian Messiter and produced by Pete Atkins. We present Kenneth Williams, Clement Freud, Peter Jones and Victoria Wood in Just a Minute. And as the minute waltz fades away, here to tell you about it is our chairman, Nicholas Parsons.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Hello and welcome once again to Just a Minute. Once again, I'm going to ask them if they can speak on the subject that I will give them and try and do it without hesitation, repetition, or deviating from the subject. And let us begin the show this week with Kenneth Williams. The subject is going off at the deep end. So something that you would never dream of doing, I'm sure, Kenneth. But can you talk on the subject for 60 seconds, starting now?
Divers are advised to go off at the deep end because if they do it the shallow one, well, they're liable to have a lot of trouble on impact. You see, I was at school and the swimming lessons were obligatory. In other words, I was forced to attend them. And I didn't take a lot of pleasure in the idea of it because I'm not really given to athleticism in any way. I'm more your cup of tea and an aspirin and a lie down because I don't think you should expend an awful lot of energy, least of all in swimming baths where I think you...
Clement Freud is challenged.
Repetition of swimming.
Yes, you mentioned swimming before, I'm afraid, Kenneth. So Clement Freud has a correct challenge. He gets a point for that, of course, and he takes over the subject with 24 seconds left, going off at the deep end, starting now.
If you're going to go off, the deep end is not a bad place in which to do it. And an extraordinary smell emanates from your person, while all around the municipal baths people nudge each other and say, I believe he is going off, and especially at the deep end. At the shallow side of the pool...
When Ian Messiter blows his whistle, that tells us 60 seconds is up. Whoever is speaking at that moment gains the extra point. It was Clement Freud on this occasion, and I don't need to tell you that he has the lead at the end of the first round. In fact, he's the only one who scored any points. We'd also like you to begin the second round, Clement, and...
Has the Monopoly Commission looked into this?
Well, the subject is so much you that we thought we should ask you to take this round. The subject is stewed hippo. And I'm sure you can tell us something about that in the game, starting now.
Stewing is alternate culinary methodology to boiling, roasting, deep or shallow frying, and baking. And I suggest by far the best way of doing it is to cut the meat into small cubes, such as you might put on a skewer, or be able to put into your mouth at one time. Sauté it, which is French for... I've said it.
Peter Jones is challenged.
Hesitation.
Yes, I think you are right, and you have the subject, and you have stewed hippo with 17 seconds left, starting now.
Well, hippos usually lie about in mud and water. And if they were immersed in gin or some other alcoholic beverage, they would become stewed hippos. And I think that's about all I can say. Fortunately, I don't have...
Kenneth Williams.
I don't agree. I'm sure there's a lot more he could say on that subject. With his inventiveness and his extraordinary verbal dexterity, I think he could go on forever if he wanted to.
So you're accusing him of deviation?
Yes, certainly.
Well, you've been very clever because you've got him with 2 seconds to go. And a point for a correct challenge, and stewed hippo starting now.
Well, of course, nobody has it. Nobody civilized would have it. It's a fact, though.
Right. So, Kenneth Williams got the extra point, speaking as the whistle went. He's in a strong second position.
2 points behind Clement Freud, who's still in the lead. Peter Jones has 1 point, and he begins the next round, and the subject is getting stuck in the lift. Peter, don't laugh. It's happened to me once. It is frightening. There are 60 seconds, starting now.
Well, if you're going to get stuck in a lift, the important thing is to choose a companion who is congenial and will help pass the time in as pleasant a way as possible. And then getting stuck in a lift can be relatively pleasant. Between 2 floors, perhaps during...
Victoria Wood challenge.
Hesitation.
Hesitation is right, Victoria. You have 42 seconds, which are left for this subject. So could you tell us something about getting stuck in the lift, starting now?
Getting stuck in a lift is much easier if you put in more people in the lift than the lift instruction, which is usually on the wall, tells you you should have. So what I would suggest if you want to get stuck in the lift is to get in the lift and then bring in your friends or your wives or your husbands or your animals so that there are more kilograms inside the cube that's moving up and down, because I don't know if I'm supposed to say lift any more times or not. Nicholas, can I?
Well, almost everything.
Yes.
You name it, she did it.
So, Clement, you have 14 seconds on getting stuck in the lift, starting now.
If you get stuck in a lift, I suggest you lose weight, and it'll be quite easy to get out. But if the lift gets stuck, you really are in trouble, especially if it does so between 2 floors, because it is extraordinarily difficult if you're claustrophobic.
So Clement Freud, another point for speaking as the whistle went, and has increased his lead. So Victoria Wood, your turn to begin. The subject that EMS has chosen is the last time my husband sawed me in half.
When?
That's the subject, my
Yes,
love. Would you tell us something about it in the game, starting now?
The last time my husband sawed me in half was in November, when he wanted to test out a trick which is called a stomach zopper, which is a piece of equipment which he was using to cut into the actor Roy Kinnear, who was appearing in pantomime with him at the Palace Theatre in Manchester. And he called me in from the other room and he said he'd like to try out this particular thing that I've just mentioned. And I lay on it. It was a very large, oblong, black thing with casters and a bit that fitted over the top, over your stomach, with a Black & Decker saw that went across in the middle. So I lay down and he switched it on and pressed it right across the middle after having said the magic words Ole Torremolinos. And then he switched it on and it goes bzzz, makes a very frightening noise. I can't tell you how it works, though I do know it's something to do with an extra bit of equipment which I can't mention. And then he ran it across backwards and lo, there I was, not in 2 bits but in 1, because it was magic. And that's actually the end of the story. I don't know if I have to keep on talking.
Clement Freud, you challenge.
Deviation is the end of the story.
That's not deviation.
That is not deviation.
Deviation from
no.
the subject of the last time I...
She said that was the end of the story. She was still keeping on the subject. So that challenge is incorrect, Clement. And you have 4 more seconds. Victoria, to try and keep going on the last time my husband sawed me in half, starting now.
The last time my husband sawed me in half was 4:30 on a wet Wednesday.
So Victoria Wood was then speaking as the whistle went, and she has gained points in that round with which she began, and she is now in second place behind our leader, Clement Freud. Kenneth, would you begin the next subject? The subject is the 3 bears. 60 seconds, starting now.
This is a children's nursery rhyme, as I recall.
Victoria Wood, challenge.
It's not one. It's a story. Sorry.
I beg your pardon. Yes, it's a story, a children's story. Shall I go on?
That's a good challenge, Victoria, yes.
Yes, I think so.
I'm sorry, I was a bit confused. I thought it was the children's aspect you were challenging on. I apologize.
No.
There are 53 seconds.
You thought it was a grown-up nursery rhyme?
You do have to make allowances for my rather weak mental capacity.
Yes,
that's why I have the job. If I was as intelligent as you, we wouldn't be able to have a good game.
Oh, come on now. Come on. Be serious.
52...
If I wanted to be funny, I'd wear a suit like that.
You were before I bought it. Right, let's get back to just a minute. 52 seconds. Victoria Wood, The Three Bears.
The Three Bears is a children's story, though some people, I believe, think it's a nursery rhyme, but actually it's not. It's a children's story, and it was a...
And Clement Freud challenge.
Hello?
Repetition of children's story.
Yes, I think
I'm afraid so.
yes.
So, Clement, there are 50 seconds on The Three Bears, starting now.
When my husband sawn 3 bears in half.
That's insanity.
It may be insanity, but we don't know yet whether he's deviated from the subject. So we're giving the benefit of the doubt and asked him to continue on The Three Bears with 47 seconds left, starting now.
He did it vertically instead of horizontally. So there were 6 bears, which was embarrassing. As he...
Victoria Wood.
You can't make 6 bears by cutting 3 into 2. You only get 6 bits.
6 halves, yes. Well done, Victoria.
Yes.
There are... 40 seconds on The Three Bears, starting now.
The Three Bears takes place in a wood, in a little cottage. It's about 3 hairy animals who eat porridge and sleep in wooden beds. On one day they are visited by a tiny girl called Goldilocks, and the reason she's called that is because she's got long blonde hair, and one day she goes into the house, breaks and enters even, while they're not there, and she eats all their porridge and sleeps in one of their beds. I said porridge, I said beds, I know.
I don't think you could tell the story of the 3 bears without repeating yourself.
It's the charm of the story, actually,
Exactly,
isn't
it is. That's why
What
it's so
children
devilishly cunning of them to have set this as a subject.
So, their devilish cunning has helped you, Peter, and you have 17 seconds on The Three Bears, starting now.
I've never heard the end of the story because my interest begins to wane on the 3rd repetition. And when it's discovered...
Victoria
Repetition.
Chun.
What?
Repetition. He said repetition.
Yeah, but he used the word repetition. He didn't repeat. Peter, you have a point for that, and Victoria gets a round of applause from her mother in the audience. There are 8 seconds for The Three Bears, starting now.
I've always thought this Goldilocks character must have been a dumb blonde because she doesn't really take in the fact that there are intruders in this...
So, at the end of the round, Peter was speaking as the whistle went. He's still in 3rd place. Kenneth's gone back to 4th place, and Clement begins the next round. The subject, Clement, is being kind to the taxman. Will you tell us something about that subject, starting now?
When I met the taxman, I said, I am proud to pay tax, but could be just as much so if I paid less. And I then decided that the best thing to do was to kill him with kindness. And my
Victoria Wood challenge.
Hesitation. There seems to be an awfully long gap with nothing happening, I thought.
Well, it was a tremendously big decision to make.
As you are our guest, and Clement's in a strong lead.
I don't want favours.
Someone has to have the benefit of the doubt. In my mind, somebody has to have the benefit of the doubt for that one, and I'm giving you the benefit of the doubt.
I'm not taking it.
Won't have it.
And Clement's not taking it either, so I'll take over the subject.
I don't want it.
No,
I concede the whole. I don't want it.
You have it, because we want to know what you have to say about being kind to the taxman, starting now.
Being kind to the taxman consists of giving him a cup of coffee and a biscuit and sitting him in your favourite chair in your own living room and listening to him talk about his wife and his golf and his hobbies and giving him a lot of money.
Kenneth Wilmshire.
Well, there were a lot of hises, weren't there?
Yes,
3, actually.
I keep forgetting the rules. Yes,
I
you're right.
think there were too many for the game.
There were too many, do you see, Nicholas?
Yes.
So I felt I had to
Duty
protest.
bound.
You follow me?
And I thought you protested charmingly.
Thank you very much.
And you have 34 seconds for the subject of being kind to the taxman, starting now.
I had to be kind to a taxman. It was in Kingsway, and actually he pointed out to me, I thought most revealingly, that you could not go through every dossier in your area. He said, otherwise, like London Airport, no planes would ever take off. You can only inspect 1 or 2 at random. And he said, W came up. I said, what a shame! Because I'd been lying more or less dormant for ages, like a hibernating moth or mouse.
So Kenneth Williams is now in a strong 3rd place alongside Peter Jones. 2 behind Victoria Wood and 4 behind Clement Freud, and Peter begins the next round. My favourite sound. That is the subject, Peter. You have 60 seconds as usual, starting now.
I suppose it is really the sound of the human voice, which I prefer to musical instruments or machinery or people banging about in heavy shoes on wooden floors or throwing tins of fruit onto corrugated iron roofs, or practically any...
Victoria Wood challenge.
Lots of oars.
Yes, Victoria Wood, continue on the subject of my favourite sound with 39 seconds left, starting now.
My favourite sound is the noise you get when one person takes the palm of one hand and puts it against the other and does it over and over again very, very quickly. I said over twice.
Yes.
She said over and over.
I know.
Yes, she did. Over and over again. 29 seconds left for my favourite sound, Clement, starting now.
My favourite sound is Nicholas Parsons saying, and so we come to another end of Just a Minute, and Clement Freud has won again.
And Kenneth Williams.
Hesitation.
Yes, you did hesitate when you thought of me
Loads of
again.
hesitations there. He just didn't know really what to say next, poor fellow. He was literally floundering,
He obviously,
wasn't he, in that beard?
he obviously never listens to what I say at the end because he couldn't remember.
Right.
There are 21 seconds for you, Kenneth, on my favourite sound, starting now.
It is the guitar, and I had the most marvellous time in the dressing room at Old Empire at Hackney, where Gordon Jackson played this wonderful melody to me, which he'd only recently learned and conquered, so to speak. It is the cello. I adore it.
Well, after that round with Kenneth gaining more points, including one when speaking as the whistle went, he's now in second place alongside Victoria Wood, only 2 behind our leader Clement Freud, and Peter Jones follows them. Victoria Wood, would you take the next round? The subject is The Night I Forgot My Lines. Will you tell us something about that in the game starting now?
The night I forgot my lines was in a show called Funny Turns, in which I appeared at the Duchess Theatre in Catherine Street in London last summer, and it was a matinee on a...
Peter Jones challenge.
Hesitation.
50 seconds are left for you, Peter, on The Night I Forgot My Lines, starting now.
Since my only object in appearing in this program is to advertise the fact that I'm available for a real job of work, I don't see why I should advertise the fact that...
Clement Freud challenge.
To advertise.
Yes,
I did. Yes, of
Too
course.
much advertising,
Yes.
I'm afraid,
How
Peter.
unfortunate.
There are 37 seconds on The Night I Forgot My Lines with you, Clement, starting now.
On the morning of the night I forgot my lines, the schoolmaster, who was looking after me at the time in Berkshire, said, "Freud, take 450 lines." "Yes, sir," I said, because I was an obedient child, and went to my study to write out, "It is the mark of insincerity of purpose to seek a high-born emperor in a low-down tea shop." When I had done this only 139 times...
Yes, Kenneth.
Well, hesitation, I thought.
After you pressed the buzzer, I hesitated.
But he did repeat the word times. Well done. There are 12 seconds for
we
you,
want a nice
Kenneth, on
fair
The Night
game.
I Forgot My Lines, starting now.
Well, I immediately, the night I forgot my lines, just sort of, played it for as though I knew what I was doing.
Clement Freud challenge.
That was hesitation.
Yes, I think so.
Well, I was
definitely.
trying to think of the word fill in. That's what I couldn't think of.
You forgot
I
your
was
line.
filling in. That's what I was doing, you see.
You were demonstrating how to forget your lines. Clement, you have 4 seconds on The Night I Forgot My Lines, starting now.
Might I, as an alternative, copy out, "Oh, that we now..."
So, Clement Freud, speaking again as the whistle went, has increased his lead, and Kenneth Williams begins the next round. The subject, Kenneth, is Giotto. Would you tell us something about him in the game, starting now?
The first we really know of him is about 1304 because of that incredible decoration in what is known, I think, as the Arena Chapel in Padua. Of course, there are other works that spring to mind. I always think the most outstanding is faith, that wonderful picture of the woman in the arch, which looks, incidentally, almost as if it were a statue. And this is where he is so far ahead in that incredible Renaissance world, because he takes one from the Byzantine flatness, almost two-dimensional, to this reality. The lovely paintings that he's done at Assisi depict various moments in the life of the great saint. And he was at pains to show the beginning as a reprobate, a man who really liked a lot of money and singing and joking.
So, Kenneth Williams took an intellectual subject there and kept going with great style to the end. He was interrupted once. He gets a point for that, a point for speaking as the whistle went, and he's only 2 points behind our leader, Clement Freud, who begins the next round. The subject, Clement, when the car breaks down. Will you tell us something about that in just a minute, starting now?
When the car breaks down, and you're about to talk about it on Just a Minute on BBC Radio Television, or... Yes.
It's on the radio, not on the television.
Yes, and radio
So
television
far.
is a very strange medium to work in. So, Victoria, I agree with the challenge. You have 52 and a half seconds when the car breaks down, starting now.
When the car breaks
Clement
down...
Freud.
Hesitation.
No. You have 50 seconds now, and when the car breaks down...
The thing to do is to make sure you don't burst into tears, because when you're crying, it's very hard to make yourself heard on the other end of the telephone on the motorway, what with the lorries going past and roaring and people overtaking. It's very difficult, and it gets a bit upsetting if they can't quite catch what you're saying and the nature of your breakdown.
Peter Jones is challenged.
She repeated saying.
That's right, what
Did
you're
I?
saying. Yes, it is, Peter. There are 31 and a half seconds, actually, for you, Peter, when the car breaks down, starting now.
They will then instruct you to stand by your vehicle. Well, after 2 or 3 days, a man will come in a van and he will say, I think your battery's flat. And you'll then give him about £4 and he'll connect the battery.
Clement Freud.
I beg your pardon. I'm terribly sorry.
What are you sorry about? What are you going on about you're sorry? What happened?
Nothing happened.
You keep on saying he's
Victoria
sorry.
Wood, I must say, who's sitting next to you, seems to be enjoying it all for whatever you were sorry about.
Yes, quite.
Clement Freud, you have the subject, and there are 11 seconds when the car breaks down, starting now.
While broadcasting, never ever mention the name of the maker, otherwise you will be sued and have to appear in court, either on slander or libel charges, which tend to be terribly expensive.
So Clement Freud, extra point, speaking as the whistle went, has increased his lead, and Peter Jones begins the next round. The subject, Peter, is puzzles. Will you tell us something about that in just a minute, starting now?
I suppose the worst kind of puzzles are those little things that you carry about in your pocket with a lot of little balls or ball bearings, perhaps they are. Anyway, they're tiny, and there are a lot of holes like a miniature golf course, and you have to sort of maneuver this little box around in such a way. I think they've given up, haven't they, over there? Have they,
Kenneth Williams, your challenge.
Are they going to? Because Clement and I have certainly not given up, so it's deviation.
I thought you...
Kenneth, you have the subject, and there are 37 seconds on puzzles, starting now.
I don't like them, you know, because they're really a test, you see, and I don't think people should be submitted to any of these tests on one occasion.
Victoria Wood, challenge.
Test.
Test, yes.
No, I said they're really a test, and I don't like tests. So I used the singular and then a plural. You all tell us, well, wash your ears out. I'm in on time.
See, well, she hasn't come all the way from the north of England to be insulted.
I've come all the way from Great Poland Street, mate. How's that? I can show them.
Last time she was here, she had great trouble arriving because of the train problems.
What's that got to do with puzzles?
Because of the aggressive way in which you speak to our charming guest.
Oh,
and I'm here to protect her.
There's nothing aggressive about me, is there? I'm the most...
For once you haven't got the audience reaction you expected. They may like you, but they know you're aggressive, but you were also correct, so I must be fair within the game and say that you continue with 28 seconds on puzzles, starting now.
One of them is this snakes and ladders. They say you've got to throw this dice, and the puzzle is to get to this place without falling over a snake which is on some sort of ladder.
Clement.
Repetition of this.
Oh, you are mean.
Don't allow it. It's ridiculous. You're the chairman. Don't allow it. It's a balmy challenge. No, it's just childishly petulant.
Yes,
because he's not winning. That's the reason. He can see that I'm leaping into the lead. That's what gets him down. Plus the fact that the end is my hair. It's like spun gold. Always envied it, you see.
We don't challenge, like with the oars, we had 4 oars, we had 3 hisses, but we only had 2 thises, and I think that's one of those things on which we desist. We do not.
Precisely, yes, what a very good chairman. Very good, yes.
Kenneth, you have 19 seconds on puzzle starting now.
Of course, the monkey puzzle is another, and there is a tree which is called the monkey puzzle. I always think it's rather funny.
Peter Jones, a challenge.
Repetition of monkey.
12 seconds.
Actually, I met a brass one outside. He told me the most amazing story.
Kenneth Williams.
Hesitation. He stopped.
Well, he hadn't started, actually. There are still 12 seconds left, Peter, for you to go on puzzle starting now.
And there is...
Victoria Wood.
Everything. Did everything wrong.
Absolutely everything. Yes, well, that's what happens if you stop and start and don't get a chance. There are 9.5 seconds for puzzles with you, Victoria, starting now.
The most famous kind and the original kind and the word...
Clement
That
Freud
kind, thank you, yes. You carry on. Don't mind me.
Repetition of kind.
Yes, it wasn't very kind, but you are right on the... your challenge, and there are 7 seconds for puzzles with you, Clement, starting now.
I was given one last Christmas. It had 4 jugglers and 3 balls, trying to get 2 hats into 1 aperture, which was...
Well, I'm afraid we have no more time to play. Just a minute, so let me give you the final score. A lot of points were scored in this particular game. Peter Jones picked up quite a number, but still finished in 4th place. Our guest, Victoria Wood, was a little way behind Kenneth Williams, who nearly won. But at that last throw of the dice, Clement Freud came back to overtake him, and is this week's winner, Clement Freud. Enjoyed listening to Just a Minute. We hope you've enjoyed it in the audience as much as we've enjoyed playing it, and we'll want to tune in again at the same time next week when we take to the air and we play this delightful game. Till then, from all of us here, goodbye.
The chairman of Just a Minute was Nicholas Parsons. The programme was devised by Ian Messiter and produced by Pete Atkin. We present Kenneth Williams, Clement Freud, Amy MacDonald, and Jan Ravens in Just a Minute. And as the minute waltz fades away, here to tell you about it is our chairman, Nicholas Parsons.
Thank you for the cheers and the boos. They both mean as much. And welcome once again to Just a Minute. And as you just heard from our announcer, this week we have 2 guests of the female gender. We have back the lovely Amy MacDonald, and after her triumphs earlier this year, Jan Ravens. So would you welcome them both, please? Once again, they're all going to try and speak at different times, we hope, on the subject that I give them, and they will try and do that without hesitation, repetition, or deviating from the subject. And we'll begin the show this week with Clement Freud. Clement, the subject is how to have fun in a public library. Would you talk on that subject for just a minute, if you can, starting now?
I think if I had 2 hours in which to think of a subject, how to have fun in a public library would have eluded me. But probably the best way of doing it is to bring your own fun, and then you have to return it within 14 days or pay a fine. In view of the fact that you are not allowed to speak in a public library, such amusement as you provide would have to be silent, and mime might be the favorite vehicle for deployment in order to cause entertainment to one and all who have library cards, which is, of course, a prerequisite and an essential for gaining admission to civic buildings of that order. Many times...
Amy MacDonald was challenged.
Hesitation. Nobody stopped and took a breath. The breath was just a little bit too big.
I know, but if we challenge on breaths, we never get going at all in this game. So, Amy, Clement has a point for an incorrect challenge, and there are 18 seconds left. How to have fun in a public library, Clement, starting now.
Breathing is actually one of the few things that you can do in a public library, although the provision of humour is not implicit in that particular exercise of either the vocal cords or the pulmonary or lungal capacity.
Amy MacDonald challenged.
A repetition of oars. There's a lot of oars in there.
Yeah, there were a lot of oars, and we don't want too many of those in just a minute. But actually, it was because it was such a positive oar that I will give it to you, Amy. And with 3 seconds to go, you've got in on how to have fun in a public library, starting now.
The best way to have fun in a public library, of course, is...
So when Ian Messiter blows his whistle, it tells us that 60 seconds is up, and whoever is speaking at that moment gains an extra point, and it was Amy MacDonald. She did the same thing the last time she was here a number of weeks ago. And Amy, at the end of the first round, you are in the lead, one ahead of Clement Freud, and also we'd like you to begin the next round. The subject is What I Knew at 18. Can you reveal some of that in the game starting now?
Oh, darling, it was so long ago. But actually, I didn't quite honestly know an awful lot. I remember at school, my mind used to wander with great gusto over all sorts of fields except what I was actually supposed to be concentrating on. And the great things of algebra and geometry and geography and history and Latin.
And Kenneth Williams.
We have had about 5 ands.
Yes, there were 4 ands. So I'm afraid 4 is too strong. And Kenneth has the subject of What I Knew at 18. And there are 35 seconds left, Kenneth, starting now.
What I knew at 18 was that I possessed an extraordinary talent. And I said to myself, I'm coming up at your door and making you a very nice proposition. It happened. The army called me. I was paraded in front of these men in white coats. And this fella said, pull your stomach round to the front, for heaven's sake. I had my back to him at the time, so you can imagine the confusion that ensued. But off I was sent to a Bela Lugosi-like figure who took a pint of blood from my veins.
So Kenneth, having gained the subject, kept going till the whistle went, gained that all-important extra point, and he's equal in the lead with Amy MacDonald at the end of the round. And Kenneth, will you begin the next round? The subject is just simply Pam. Will you tell us something about Pam with an M at the end, starting now?
Pam was mistakenly by Johnston put into the dictionary with quite the wrong definition. He actually said that it was derived from palm, meaning victory. In point of fact, it was erroneous. It was a nickname also for a great statesman. And Pam Ayres, we all know, that delightful West Country rhymester. I've often said when meeting her, oh, Pam, I don't know how you do it. You think these wonderful little couplets up, and you must have some sort of gift in your sleep. You get up in the morning and you get out your pencil and paper.
Amy MacDonald.
A repetition of you. You get up in the morning, you get out your thing, you do...
You are this, you are that. Yes, there were more than 2 or 3 of them, so we do allow the
You
little
think
words
that's
to go.
non-you, do you?
I think the little words, if they're repeated too often, we give it to the...
Oh, those
opposition.
little things remind me of you.
You mustn't bring out these secrets in public, Kenneth. There are 12 seconds for you, Pam. Sorry, for you, Amy. So, Amy, will you talk about Pam with 12 seconds to go, starting now?
Pam is a wonderful lady. She lives down the stairs from me, and nothing is too much trouble. In her spare time, she works in a circus as a tightrope walker.
Well, once again, Amy MacDonald was speaking as the whistle went and gained an extra point, and she has increased her lead over Kenneth Williams and, of course, the others as well. Jan Ravens, will you take the next round? Jan, the subject is getting away with it. Will you tell us something about that in the game starting now?
My best feats at getting away with it were performed when I was at school, and I always had an excuse for any little naughty thing that I'd performed. I well remember when friends of mine and myself used to skive off school every Friday morning and go to somebody's house for coffee. And one day, as I was leaving the premises, I was stopped in my tracks by the deputy headmistress, who said to me, "Where do you think you're going?" And right on the spur of the moment, I thought, what can I say? I said, "It's my cat." And she said, "What's wrong?" I said, "It hasn't eaten for days and days. I've got to..."
Amy.
Well, it's a repetition of said.
Yes,
said,
you were very
and
generous. Yes,
hesitation.
we let them go on the saids. But when you... Amy, you have 19 seconds on getting away with it starting now.
I was off school once with a bad cold, and when I went back, I said to the teacher that I had swallowed marbles, to which point she got all the girls in the class together.
Kenneth Williams.
The deviation is ungrammatical, to which point she got. I mean, it's rubbish. But it makes sense, does it?
It doesn't.
I don't even know.
I don't know why you engage these illiterates to go on.
So, Kenneth, you get away with a certain amount of colloquialism, but all right, you have 8 seconds on getting away with it starting now.
I'm getting away with it all the time. And I come on and I say, "Oh, I'll have a large one."
And Clement Freud challenged.
That's 4 eyes in 5 seconds.
I'm getting away with it. Yes, there were 4 eyes. We've been challenging on those.
You always say we don't take any notice of these little things, like I and he.
And, yes, but when there's been
We've taken
4...
notice of about 5 more that you challenged on.
But when there
You
were
said loads of eyes about
You
your
challenged on
reporting.
and we granted it because there were 4
Oh,
or 5.
shut your row, I didn't. Thank you. The audience understands exactly. You see, the audience has the logical mind. You understand? They're judging it.
You
fair.
won a challenge on 4 ands, so Clement's entitled to win one on 4 eyes. And that's the way I interpret it, because that's the way I have to dispense justice in just a minute. It makes me sound very pompous, but I can't help it. There's 1 second for Clement on getting away with it starting now.
I had a white mouse. Didn't have a deputy headmistress.
So Clement Freud was speaking as the whistle went, gained an extra point, and he's still in 3rd place. And he also begins the next round, and Clement, the subject is Paris. Will you tell us something about that enchanting city in the game, starting now? Kenneth Williams, challenge.
Hesitation, I'm afraid.
Yes, there was. He thought of Paris and just went into a dwam, as they say in Scotland. So,
Well, you said city, you see, and I was going to talk about Paris, not the city, which is why I stopped.
I think you were being very generous to Kenneth, because I know he's got a lot to say on Paris, too. And there are 58 seconds for you, Kenneth, on Paris, starting now.
Well, Cole Porter had this enchanting song the last time I saw Paris, and of course it rather threw into the shade Paris is Paris again, which has an enchanting link.
Jan Ravens has challenged.
I think you said enchanting twice.
Yes, he did, I'm afraid. So, Jan, you have a correct challenge, and you have 44 seconds to talk on Paris, starting now.
I have never been to Paris, but I believe that there are many mime artists on the street, and they perform lots of different acts, and they pretend to be many different...
And Amy MacDonald challenged.
I know the feeling, darling. That was repetition.
I know, it's beautifully mimed for radio, too, wasn't it? 20 seconds are left for Paris with you, Amy, starting now.
Oh, the Bois de Boulogne, the Champs-Élysées, the Arc de Triomphe, the Palais de Versailles, the Lido de
Clement
Boulogne.
challenged.
How about the Place Pigalle?
So were you helping again or challenging? You were giving it the plus Picard to her.
I
Let her
regret
keep
it,
the subject.
Sam.
Well, there was sort of hesitation.
There was
I
hesitation,
I would
Clement.
help.
12 seconds for you on Paris, starting now.
Has one of the cleanest metro systems in the whole world. And the carriages come...
Amy MacDonald challenged.
Deviation, I disagree.
Well, you can disagree, but he can still say it. You see, he's not actually deviating from
Well, he
Paris.
can't possibly say that because it's not true.
It's true.
It is actually true.
Yes.
I believe it's true, but it doesn't matter whether a general comparison's been done. Doesn't matter. He wasn't, in his opinion. That is what he was saying about Paris, and it's all right within the game. And 8 seconds for you to continue, Clement, starting now.
Occasionally, dirty people get into a train, but by and large, we can accept.
Amy MacDonald.
What's he looking at me for?
Because he was trying to make his point, the fact that it is the cleanest metro. But no, you mustn't take that personally, Amy, because we know how often you wash. And if you want to know how I know, I'm not going to reveal. And Clement, you keep going with 2 more seconds. Paris, starting now.
April, May, and June are the best months.
Well, spurred on by his cheer group from Chatteris, Clement Freud has got a number of extra points, and he's still in second place behind Amy MacDonald, just ahead of Kenneth Williams, and Jan Ravens is just behind Kenneth. And Amy begins the next round. The subject, this is a strong subject, an affair I'd like to have had. No, an affair I'd like to have. It's in the future, so it's all right.
Oh, what, darling?
This is what EMS has thought of. An affair I'd like to have.
Oh.
I think Ian's got something in the back of his mind on that subject for you, Amy. So anyway, there are 60 seconds for you to talk on that, starting now.
Well, there is an affair I would like to have, and I do plan to commence this situation this coming summer. When upon I shall...
Jan Ravens challenged.
Hesitation.
Yes, we won't
Quite
find
right,
out
dear.
what this
Let's see
affair
about
she's going
yours
to
now.
commence.
Right.
They're getting very catty over here, you know.
Let's hear, yes, because I must explain to our listeners the 2 girls are sitting together and the 2 fellows are sitting opposite them. And Jan Ravens has got in with 50 seconds to go. An affair I'd like to have, Jan, starting now.
An affair I'd like to have is one with my public. I would like to take my audience home with me in the evening after the show.
Amy MacDonald challenged.
Oh, I can't think of the word, but you can't have an affair with public. I mean, that's lots and lots
Well,
of affairs.
It's a small audience.
She's not very broad-minded, is she?
Well, I don't know about that, but I think, generally speaking, you people do talk in showbiz about having an affair with an audience. It's a little bit incestuous, but on the other hand, it is a phrase, and she used it, and she was not deviating, and she has 43 seconds. An affair I'd like to have, Jan, starting now.
An affair I'd like to have is one with about 50 people and some pretzels and some bagels, maybe...
Kenneth Williams challenge.
Well, some
There was some yes. After those 15 people, you could only what the hell are you going to do with them? And you heard. And, well, you might. 36 seconds, Kenneth, for you. An affair I'd like to have, starting now.
Obviously, I would like to have a steamy affair with some gorgeous Galatea-like creature. Now, you know that in Greek mythology, this was the one who perfectly created in the actual marble suddenly came to life. I'm not saying she actually made not.
Amy MacDonald challenge.
There's 2 actually, sir.
Yes, you did say actually before, Kenneth. I'm sorry. Amy, we're back with you on this affair, and you left us in the middle of the summer, actually. I must remind you if you want to continue. There are 12 seconds, starting now.
I shall don the smallest bikini you have ever seen in your life, and then I will climb the stairs out onto my little patio. I shall spread myself...
Clement Freud challenge.
It's deviation. She's nothing to do with an affair. She's
Oh, don't I'm getting to that. God is impatient.
She works slowly up to these things.
Well, it's not that far in the future, is it?
Well, I felt that she was working slowly up to the affair, and she hadn't actually deviated. And there are 4 seconds, Amy, starting now.
My towel will be clasped in one hand, my baby oil in the other.
So Amy MacDonald cleverly kept going on the subject, but never revealing actually who was the person who was going to greet her on the stairs on her patio with her towel and her
It
bikini.
was sundown. I was going to throw myself akimbo and say, take me to the sun.
Oh, yes. Who was going to take you there?
No, the sun, I was talking
You were going to have an
the
affair
sun.
with the sun. Jan's going to have
Yes.
it with her audience. Kenneth's going to have it with some mythical figure from Greek mythology. And Clement Freud, he couldn't care less.
He's too impatient, that's why.
Oh, is that it? I hope you're not speaking from experience, Jan. Amy, you have increased your lead. You're in a very strong lead. You are 4 points ahead of Clement Freud and Kenneth Williams, equal in second place, and 6 points ahead of Jan Ravens. Kenneth, it's your turn to begin. The subject is the pricking of my thumbs. Will you tell us something about that in the game, starting now?
As far as I know, it's a rhyme about by the pricking of my thumbs, like they see bear their...
Amy McDonald.
It's bear their tums, isn't it? Tummies and tummies. Isn't it?
I know, but it didn't come quick enough to mine, so you hesitated. And Amy has got in with the subject of the pricking of my thumbs in 54 seconds, starting now.
As every lady knows, when you sew on a button, it can be rather dangerous and you could prick your thumb. In order not to do this, you tend to cover it up with what is commonly known as a thimble. I don't like those things at all. I never use them. Consequently, my thumbs are always getting pricked. And...
Clement Freud challenge.
Pricked.
No, she didn't say pricked before. She said the pricking before.
Oh, good.
Yeah. So Amy has another point and 30 seconds on the pricking of my thumbs, starting now.
when it happens, oh, my goodness me, I can't tell you, there's blood everywhere. You have to rush to the medicine cabinet, get out a piece of Elastoplast, having soaked it first of all in cold water. That's the best thing, because you see it stops the flow. Then you snap this thing on and stick it down and go back to your...
Clement Freud.
Hesitation?
Yes, you're back to your... Yes.
Quite right.
Yes.
What?
So, Clement, Jan
Sorry,
Raven.
I was just checking that my buzzer was working. Because people keep getting in before me. I think I must have very bad reflexes.
I don't...
Somebody better do that test on me, you know, that with your knees. To test your reflexes.
Oh, yes, yes. Well, can we wait till after the show?
Okay.
Good. Clement Freud, you got in with 9 seconds ago on the pricking of my thumbs, starting now.
The only way you could achieve this is with a needle which is sharp at both ends, and if you hold that between your two outstretched hands...
Well, the audience usually cheer for Kenneth Williams when he gets extra points. This week they are cheering for Clement Freud because he has brought a group with him. And Amy MacDonald is still in the lead. And Jan Ravens begins the next round. And the subject, Jan, is bunglers. Can you tell us something about bunglers in just a minute, starting now?
When my parents retire, all that they want is a nice little bungalow with 2 bedrooms and a bathroom and a kitchen with lots of working surfaces. This little bungalow should be somewhere rural with a nice little...
Kenneth Williams, a challenge.
What deviation? I mean, she's using bungalow as another word for bungalow, and it don't sound anything like it.
But in spite of the audience applause, in just a minute, you can use a word, interpret it in every way you wish.
Well, only if it sounds like it, but bungalow does not
For
sound like
all
bungalow.
we know, Jan's parents might always refer to bungalows as bunglers. It might be just something in their family and
You must be
idiosyncrasy
the biggest idiot in Christendom.
I have to have some qualifications for this job, you know that.
Well, they're not actually showing, are they?
Well, one of them shows is when I give you very good feed lines. And you come back with remarks like that, and there are 44 seconds for you to continue on bunglers, Jan, starting now.
The thing my
Kenneth Williams.
Hesitation.
Yes, I agree with that. Kenneth,
Getting
you
ugly.
have 42 and a half seconds on bunglers, starting now.
The biggest bunglers would be the ones that removed Jane from the Tower of London, because you have to know that when the ravens go, there is no building left.
Jan Raven started. Sorry,
Hesitation.
I'm sorry. What is your challenge?
Hesitation.
No, I don't think so. I could imagine that you were feeling very hurt, but I'm afraid you come on
Yes,
just
she's a bit of a sulk, isn't she, when she loses? You see, you've got to, on this game, you've got to be a sport, you've got to take things as it comes, you see. I always do, you see.
That's right.
It's very difficult, though, Kenneth, if you are a guest who's only played it once before and you happen to be a woman, so we do expect you. All right, it doesn't have to be a woman, then. So, anyway, Kenneth, that wasn't you hesitation. You keep the subject. 28 seconds, starting now.
One of the biggest bunglers of all time was, of course, Blondin. You know he went over Niagara Falls in this barrel on a rope. Well, now, it was a bungled operation for one very good reason. They didn't have the cameras going at the time. Think of the money he could have made. And people saying, I'm off to the cinema to see this enormously daring...
Amy MacDonald,
Oh,
chum.
hesitation, Di. He's eking
Amy.
it out.
The other one wasn't. This one
always
wasn't.
does that, though. You just have to accept it.
No, he was teetering on, but not quite. Kenneth, you have 2.5 seconds on bunglers, starting now.
Bunglers, of course, get their diction mixed up, and people like...
So, Kenneth leapt forward in that round with a number of points, including one for speaking as the whistle went. He's now in a strong second place behind Amy MacDonald, ahead of Clement Freud and Jan Ravens. And, Clement, you begin the next round. The subject is the perfect finish to the perfect meal. Will you tell us something about that in the game, starting now?
The perfect finish to the perfect meal is Amy. In fact, quite frequently has a head waiter come up to me and said, would you like the sweet trolley or Miss MacDonald? I have been...
Amy MacDonald challenged.
Oh, dear, I can't let him go on, can I?
Well, I think everybody would like you to let him go on. So we're going to let him go on and see what other indiscretions and fantasies he will come out with as he continues with 46 seconds on the perfect finish to the perfect meal, starting now.
So there one is: soup, fish, meat, pudding, dessert, cheese, savoury, fruit, and the lady sitting opposite giggling away with her strange fair hair and her hand in front of her face, and now both mitts before her eyes. Well, I would like...
Amy MacDonald.
That was hesitation.
That was hesitation. Yes, Amy, you have the subject, and you have 26 seconds on the perfect finish to the perfect meal, starting now.
The trouble is, I find it very difficult to get to the end of a meal. You see, I do love hors d'oeuvres, and I sort of indulge myself rather strongly in that direction. Then I will go on to
Clement Freud.
Deviation.
Why?
That's the beginning of a meal.
Oh, darling, I'm getting to the end of it, okay?
But you said you never like to get to the end of it, and you're very slow.
No, I'm going to tell you what happens, though.
No, actually, on this occasion, Amy, I was generous with you when you were looking for that affair, and you had a long time on the balcony before you got to it. On this occasion, I think you've been too long at the beginning of the meal to get to the end of it. So
darling, but I haven't hesitated, I haven't repeated, and I haven't deviated.
I know, but you've done very well throughout, and you're still in the lead, and it's the last round. I don't think anybody can overtake you, so I've got to be...
She's thrown down her buzzer. In a huff.
She's done very well. The second time she's been back this year, and she's in the lead. She's probably going to win. But I have to be fair. I have to try and make the correct decisions. Clement, 12 seconds, the perfect finish to the perfect meal, starting now.
Pocketing the teaspoons and dashing out without paying the bill could be the most ideal way of departing from a catering establishment.
Amy MacDonald.
I think that's terrible. Do you really do?
It is terrible, isn't it?
I mean, that is awful, isn't it?
Yes, I agree. It couldn't be the perfect finish to the perfect meal.
I mean, he's either got rude thoughts in his head or he's nicking all the cutlery.
On that basis, Amy, you have 2 seconds to finish off the round and the show this week on the perfect finish to the perfect meal, starting now.
After my steak and baked potatoes...
Well, as I told you, this was going to be the last round, so let me give you the final score. Jan Ravens, who came from her previous triumphs to do extremely well, but finished in 4th place, a little way behind. Second equals Clement Freud and Kenneth Williams, and they were 5 points behind our guest, who has come back looking lovely and to triumph as well, our winner this week, Amy MacDonald. We do hope that you have enjoyed Just a Minute and will want to tune in again at the same time next week when we take to the air and we play this delightfully impossible and hilarious game. Until then, from all of us here, goodbye.
The chairman of Just a Minute was Nicholas Parsons. The programme was devised by Ian Messiter and produced by Pete Atkins.
We present Kenneth Williams, Derek Nimmo, Clement Freud and John Junkin in Just a Minute. And as the minute waltz fades away, here to tell you about it is our chairman, Nicholas Parsons.
Thank you very much. Hello and welcome to Just a Minute. And this particular show, we welcome three of our regular players of the game and a guest who's played before with great success, John Junkin. And as usual, I'm going to ask them to speak, if they can, on the subject I give them, and they will try and do that without hesitation, repetition, or deviating from that subject. And let us begin the show this week with Kenneth Williams, and who better? And the subject, Kenneth, is getting a good start. You'd like to do that, but now talk on the subject if you can. 60 seconds starting now.
Getting a good start for an actor would mean speaking, as Hamlet advises, trippingly on the tongue. And he says, do not mouth your words someplace, I would as if the town crier spoke my lines. And do not soar the air too much with your hand, but use all gently, for remember the purpose of playing Watson is to hold, as 'twere, the mirror up to nature.
John Junkin, you pressed your buzzer, but the noise wasn't there, but the light came on. What is your challenge?
I'm not allowed to challenge on overacting, so could I challenge on deviation, because he was into Hamlet's speech to the actors, and it's got nothing to do with getting a good start.
No, John, I don't think he was actually deviating from the subject of getting a good start, which he was trying to make the case that Hamlet was instructing the players in that way. So, Kenneth, you keep the subject. There are 40 seconds left. You get a point, of course, for a wrong challenge. Getting a good start, starting now.
When a meal is being prepared, it is essential that you think of starting with something which will excite the taste buds of your visitors. Now, what could be better than a little avocado pear, perhaps vinaigrette added?
Derek Nimmo has challenged.
I think a lot could be better than an avocado pear. I wouldn't want an avocado pear at all.
Well, you may think there's nothing, that other things could be better, but Kenneth has decided that that's what he would like to start with, and it is still getting a good start. So, a wrong challenge, I'm afraid, Derek. Another point to Kenneth, and there are 23 seconds starting now.
But getting off to a good start when it comes to the hurdles and the racing means you must kneel, ready by the starting block, and as the gun is fired, off you go, and you have a tremendous spurt, you see, because the beginning of the race does...
Clement Freud challenged.
Repetition of beginning.
Yes, I'm afraid you said beginning when you were talking about wrestling. Yes. So Clement Freud has artfully got in with only 7 seconds to go on getting a good start, starting now.
Getting a good start is actually incredibly unimportant, because finishing is what matters. Were you to run in a marathon and...
When Ian Messiter blows his whistle, it tells us that 60 seconds is up, and whoever speaking at that moment gains an extra point. It was Clement Freud, and at the end of the first round, he's equal in the lead with Kenneth Williams, and he also begins the next round. The subject, Clement, is krill. Can you tell us something about that in the game, starting now?
I knew a one-eyed javelin thrower called Sebastian Krill, and while he didn't win much, he kept the audience permanently to attention, because they were a bit concerned about what might happen to the implement which he slung. But krill, I believe, is a term given to those fish that float in front of whales and provide sustenance, docky breaks, 11s, afternoon tea, or whatever it is that mammals of that kind eat when they are hungry. In the Pacific Ocean, not to mention the Atlantic and the Indian one, and quite particularly around Mauritius and Réunion, although there have been sightings in Guadeloupe and Martinique. Krill of various colors, but...
With 5.5 seconds to go, Derek, you got in with the challenge. What was it?
Well, hesitation.
Yes, it was, of course. And you have 5.5 seconds on krill starting now.
Well, krill is what I would have if I was having a good start to a meal. They're absolutely delicious. If you go to a restaurant like Croisette or like...
So, Derek Nimmo now has 2 points and is joined Clement Freud and Kenneth Williams in the lead. And John Junkin, who's yet to score, starts the next round. John, the subject is video games. Can you tell us something about that popular pastime in our game starting now?
I personally consider video games to be a very pernicious pastime. They are dangerous video games because they are time-consuming. One sits before the set holding some sort of device in one's hand where you push a button or pull a lever, and you are intended to destroy space invaders, eat gorillas, climb ladders, be bombed, sink submarines, destroy Superman.
Clement Freud is challenged.
Repetition of destroy.
Yes, I'm afraid you did say destroy
Did I?
before.
Oh,
yes,
dear.
yes. So, Clement, a correct challenge. Another point, 32 seconds. Video games starting now.
It is an extraordinary thing that the younger you are, the more expert you tend to be in the manifestation and participation in video games. I have a grandchild called Tom, although I have another called Jack, whom I would hate to be thought not to mention on a program with the wide appeal of this one.
Derek Nimmo, challenge.
We're talking about video games, not a big catalogue of his family.
Yes. I do
They're
think
the only
he-
members of my family who play video games.
Yes, I do think he had deviated from the games to the family, which is another pastime, of course, but it's not the subject on the card. So, Derek, I agree with your challenge, and you have 12 seconds on video games starting now.
I knew a boy called Tom who was frightfully good at playing video games, and I used to watch with tremendous admiration because it's very interesting that as you...
John Junkin challenge.
Hesitation.
Hesitation? He was going so fast we could hardly get a word
There was
in between.
distinct hesitation there. He was searching for
If
a
I
word.
was going as slow as Freud, I mean, he'd go...
He's actually talking quite normally, Derek. They're playing him at the wrong speed. That's all.
I disagree, John. A good attempt, but 5 seconds are left with Derek Nimmo on video games starting now.
I started playing video games.
Clement Freud challenge.
Deviation.
What from?
The way he spoke before.
Yes. As it's not a deviation within the game, I think we give Clement a bonus point for a good challenge, which we enjoyed, but leave the subject fairly with Derek Nimmo, and 2 seconds to go, starting now.
Space Invaders seems to be terribly popular. I never quite know why.
Well, Derek Nimmo has now taken the lead at the end of that round, and he also begins the next round. The subject is 9 green bottles. Derek, would you tell us something about those in the game, starting now?
Well, actually, my 9 green bottles were a Christmas present to me from Miss Freddie Bowring, who works for City and Guilds, and I thought it was very charming. Actually, when they started out, there were 10 green bottles, but 1 green bottle did accidentally fall, and so there are only now...
John Junkin challenge.
Deviation. He's talking about 10 green bottles and not 9 green bottles.
I'm sorry, John, I can't agree with you. Derek keeps the subject, 45 seconds.
Why are you being so charitable?
I'm
Not to
always
me,
charitable.
You're not normally nice to me. Why are you giving me a point? I refuse to accept your charity. Give it to John Junkin. I'm not having charity from you, Parsons.
Derek,
despise you
I've
too much
never
to
been
accept charity.
charitable to you.
No, I don't want to.
I
I'm
try
sorry.
to
No,
be
I'm not going to
fair
have
within the game.
I'm not having a handout. No, I'm not having charity. I'm sorry. You give it to John Junkin. You're being patronising. That's what you're being. You're patronising.
They'll say anything to get a laugh.
Nicholas Parsons.
Derek Nimmo, Derek, you have fairly won that point, but if you wish to hand it to John Junkin...
No.
You want it back again now,
Yes,
do you?
please. I'd like it back now.
45 seconds, starting now.
Well, the first bottle that I opened came from South Australia, from the Barossa Valley, prepared by Windy Hill Smith, and it was called Yolumba, and it's a particularly good kind of Cabernet Sauvignon. The second bottle came from Bordeaux, and that gave me particular pleasure because it was a Premier Cru, which I believe was called Autryon. Might have come from O'Brien originally, the family, so they say, from Ireland, but they went out there to France and they've prospered since. Third one that I found couldn't have been more exciting. It was a bottle of Taylor's 45, excellent port, from an old English family that went out to Portugal some 200 years ago, I believe, and they still ship back, often send their wines in fortified, of course, to Colchester. Now, the fourth one, very fascinating.
Derek Nimmo was again speaking as the whistle went, gained another extra point and has increased his lead at the end of the round. Clement Freud, your turn to begin, and the subject is chain letters. You have 60 seconds as usual, starting now.
Chain letters have always seemed to me to be the most pernicious form of swindle, in that people write to you and say, if this...
Derek Nimmo challenge.
Hesitation. A bit mean.
Oh, right.
No, I think it was a bit mean too. I don't think you really hesitated enough to be a fault in the game. So, Clement, you continue with 52 seconds on chain letters, starting now.
Threatening dire consequences if you do not send on the envelope containing a £20 note or even more. I have always felt that chain letters would be quite acceptable if the content were something other than money. And I might suggest pea soup or mashed potatoes. It would be exceedingly pleasant to get such a product through the post. And if 4 of your best...
John Junkin challenge.
Deviation.
Why?
From cents. Who wants to get pea soup through the post?
So, right? I should think probably it's illegal to send pea soup through the post, wouldn't you, in an envelope?
That too, yes.
I don't think he was deviating within the rules of the game, because you can be as fantastic as you like as long as you don't deviate from the subject. So chain letters are still with you, Clement, and there are 26 seconds left, starting now.
A freezer envelope stuffed into manila brown paper covering, bearing a 12.5p stamp, redolent.
John Junkin has challenged.
Repetition of P.
Pea soup is hyphenated, and he said pea then. That'll be your argument, won't it?
Yes, it would.
John Junkin, you have a correct challenge.
What?
16 seconds. Chain letters, starting now.
Chain letters.
Clement Freud.
Hesitation.
No. He's our guest, and we're getting him going. There are 14.5 seconds on chain letters, John, starting now.
Chain letters are immoral and conceivably illegal, in that anyone who sends a chain letter is virtually blackmailing the recipient of the said missive to send various objects or money or goodwill through the post.
So John Junkin was speaking as a whistle went, gained that all-important extra point, and he's still in third place. John, you're one ahead of Kenneth Williams, and Clement Freud is in second place behind Derek Nimmo, but John, you begin the next round. The subject is spoiling the goldfish.
Spoiling the goldfish?
Yes, I do actually have to say start now, because then Ian Messiter presses the nipple on his watch and we all start going. Spoiling the goldfish, John, starting now.
Spoiling the goldfish is a phrase that could be taken one of two ways. If by spoiling the goldfish you mean overindulging it in the way that some parents do with children, usually an only child, then it is possible to spoil the goldfish by providing it with, shall we say, a bowl made of the finest crystal, or importing from the Appalachian Mountains pure spring water for the piscine creature to indulge itself in. Or else one could provide it with a certain amount of food.
Derek Nimmo.
Repetition of provide.
Yes, you were providing once before, I'm afraid, John.
It is true.
So Derek got it with 27 seconds left. Spoiling the goldfish, Derek, starting now.
I was taught how to spoil goldfish by Nicholas Parsons' wife, Denise. She said you take a pair of scissors and you cut off their tails and their fins, and then they're thoroughly spoiled.
Clement...
Deviation. I know Denise Breyer quite well, and she'd never suggest anything so horrible. I mean, that's really horrible, and I know Denise would never suggest cutting their tails off. I know she would.
No, he just wanted to work it into the programme.
Just wanted to work it into the program. All he done.
Yes. So I agree with Kenneth's challenge, and I think I'm probably more qualified to judge. So,
I
Kenneth...
wasn't deviating from the subject, was I?
He was on the subject, but it was deviation within that subject.
Protective about your wife.
Don't you be browbeaten, Nicholas.
He doesn't like
don't
me
be
mentioning his wife.
either.
I've been browbeaten in this game for 13 years
Well,
now.
don't stand for it.
I
Stick
still
up for
ma-
yourself.
I still make decisions.
He knows that I lust after his wife. That's why he doesn't.
On that particular point, let me tell you that I think Kenneth Williams has the subject, and there are 18 seconds left, starting now.
Boiling the goldfish is done by putting too much of the food into the water. Now, people who really know, I'm a veterinary man.
Clement Freud.
Hesitation.
Yes, I think I would agree
Well, I
on that
wasn't
one.
sure whether it was a vet or an aquarian. That's what done me. You understand my point?
That last laugh, by the way, I must tell our listeners, because Kenneth was overwhelmed and actually kissed Clement Freud. And, while it might be good on television, it doesn't have much effect on radio.
Doesn't have much effect on Clement Freud either.
You don't think Kenneth Williams would do it if he thought it did have much effect? There are 5 seconds to go for you, Clement, on spoiling the goldfish, starting now.
Spoiling the goldfish would come about...
John Junkin challenge.
Hesitation.
No. 2 seconds, Clement, on spoiling the goldfish, starting now.
If you cook them without salt.
Well, Clement Freud got 2 or 3 points in that round, including one when the whistle went. He's creeping up on a leader, Derek Nimmo. Kenneth and John are trailing a little. Derek begins the next round, and the subject is a jumper. Can you tell us something about that, Derek, starting now?
Well, sometimes you use the word jumper when you're referring to a woolly, don't you, really? The sort of thing that you wear across your chest with your arms sticking through no sleeves, if you get the idea. My favourite ones come from the Fair Isles in the Shetlands. I think they're awfully nice. There's lovely woolly...
Clement Freud challenge.
Deviation.
Why?
Well, it's one or t'other.
What is?
It's Fair Islands or the Shetland Islands.
Well, it's in the Fair Isles or in the Shetlands, great.
The Fair Isles.
It's one of the little strongholds, isn't it? You ought to know. You haven't got many places.
Well tried, Clement. Derek, 45 seconds left, a jumper starting now.
Came very popular, of course, with Brideshead Revisited, didn't they? All those things came...
Clement Freud challenge.
Second, didn't they? This is rather an interrogation on Inquisition. It's meant to be a panel game.
Second, didn't they?
You said didn't they before?
Well... last Tuesday, yes.
I don't remember him saying it. I must be...
Well, your memory is defective. I think that is very
I'm not only uncharitable, I'm mentally defective and everything else, but that's the reason I have the job, because if you had a sane, intelligent person trying to control this game, it would probably not be rather boring. Derek, you have 42 seconds on a jumper starting now.
One of the best jumps I ever had was a goldfish. I cut its tail off, and you should have seen it leap in the air. My goodness, it was a sight.
Kenneth Williams.
Deviation, we all know that goldfish aren't jumpers, and so it's a very silly thing to say. Very foolish.
Well, that's one of those things. We know he didn't...
Well, you wouldn't define a goldfish as a jumper, would you?
Well, if you cut his tail off and he jumped, you say, my lord, there goes a jumper. Yes, I mean, now I think his fantasy is taking him all right, but he's still keeping on the subject.
I didn't mention your wife, did I? It's all right. It's only when I couple goldfish with his wife that he objects. He doesn't like his wife coupling with goldfish.
You made a statement of fact before which was incorrect. You would say that you weren't making a statement of fact on that occasion. So, Derek, you have 35 seconds, a jumper starting now.
Of course, a lot of marsupials are jumpers. Wombats. Aren't they fun? Don't you love them? Lovely creatures. And then, particularly, I've noticed in the Antipodes, the kangaroo. They jump tremendously.
Clement Freud.
Deviation.
Why?
I don't know. I mean...
It was about time we stopped him.
Did go on a bit.
Yes.
The kangaroo, they jump. I don't know, a lot of that.
Well, kangaroos are jumpers, aren't they, for goodness sake?
Yes, I really don't
Singular.
think, in order to be fair, I don't think I can actually give it against him, so he has to continue with 20 seconds on a jumper starting now.
Beecher's Brook, Valentine's, the Water.
John Junkin.
They're not jumpers, they're jumps.
Yes, they are
The
jumpers.
horses are jumpers that go over. And I didn't tell you
You weren't talking about the horses, you were talking about the jumps.
Yeah, you said, you started off with Beecher's and you were establishing in our mind that was a jumper, so we leave it with John Junkin now.
Captain Beecher was a jumper. That's why it was called Beecher's Brook, because Captain Beecher used to jump over them.
No, he jumped into it.
Derek, you've had a good innings on that subject, and we're giving the benefit of the doubt to John Junkin, our guest, and 18 seconds on a jumper, John, starting now.
Jumpers in my youth were very antisocial, principally because the fashion at the time was for the young lady always to wear a sweater or jumper made of Angora wool, generally light blue in colour, and the fashion for gentlemen at the time...
Derek Nimmo challenge.
Fashion,
I'm sorry. Yes, and he's got him with 3 seconds to go. A jumper, Derek, starting now.
I shouldn't think there were many jumpers in John Justin's youth. They probably wore wool.
Well, Derek Nimmo has shot into a very extended lead at the end of that round with all the wrong challenges and one for speaking as the whistle went. Kenneth, you begin the next round. The subject is What I Never Write in My Diary. What a difficult, revealing subject for just a minute. Tell us, if you can, Kenneth, starting now.
Well, life is full of the prosaic, the mundane, and very often boring, is it not? So one doesn't confine that to one's diary. I certainly wouldn't put down the details or become discursive about an experience which I'd found rather dreary. That would not find its way into my diary. I would confine it, you see, to those...
Clement Freud.
To confine.
I didn't. I said confide to my diary, and the second time I said confine, and that's an N and not a D, and I will not be picked up like this. It is absolutely disgraceful.
It's not at all disgraceful, but it's incorrect.
Yes.
So you have a point for a wrong challenge, so I wouldn't get too hot on the collar, but continue with the subject with 31 seconds left, starting now.
Also, what I would not put in my diary would be the sums of money involved in certain purchases. I'll tell you for why. Now then, I get very guilty about overspending. So I would not want to remind myself of excessive purchases, you see.
Clement Freud challenge.
Well, it sounded like purchases twice, but I expect it wasn't.
I think the friendly cuddle that Kenneth gave you indicates that he does agree with that challenge. So, Clement, you're in with 10 seconds to go on What I Never Write in My Diary, starting now.
It is almost essential never to write anything that anybody might pick up and use in evidence against you. And therefore, breakfast, lunch, tea, and dinner are meals which...
Well, Clement gained points in that round, including one for speaking as the whistle went. He's creeping up on our leader, Derek Nimmo, and John Junkin and Kenneth Williams are trailing a little. And Clement, your turn to begin. The subject is weights. You have 60 seconds as usual, starting now.
An awful lot of fuss is made about weights, and people come up to you and say, you are too heavy, far too fat, carry...
John Junkin.
Repetition of 2.
Yes, but we don't bother with those...
Why is it you never bother when I challenge and you do when other people challenge?
Well, we let little words go. If it goes on for more than a couple of times, then I think we might go. And also, it only just started. So I tell you what, as you're the guest, John, we won't charge any...
Oh, I think you should charge him, especially...
All right, now, give Clement Freud another point. This is the last round. I don't think it'll make any difference to the result.
He's not going to win, is he? I mean, he's not going to
win. Can I just tell the audience that on a previous broadcast, Tim Rice, who happens to be rich and famous and powerful, challenged somebody on yo-yo for repetition of yo, and he allowed it.
I thought that was a very clever challenge, yes.
Brilliant.
Now, are we playing the rules, or are we playing your opinion?
Well, my opinion comes into every judgment, I'm afraid.
This is
you see.
unfair. This is
It's an impossible game on which to be the chairman, and as I said, they can't find any other sucker who'll take it on, so I continue. And
what I want to know is how much you usually charge. I didn't know that you had a fee for this. You just said, I'm not going to charge you anything for this job. I mean,
I did offer, Derek.
If he'd offered you more money, would you give him a point? That's what I want to know.
Oh, you mean money in the game? Well, I have to earn a living somehow. I mean, you don't think the BBC pay me to do this job, do you?
I should hope not. I should think you're probably paid by Capital Radio to keep their figures up.
I might get some money now from sensitive listeners in all those far-flung parts of the old...
Hesitation. Oh, sorry.
Right. Anyway, send your donations in a sealed envelope. There are 52 seconds left for the subject of weights with you, Clement, starting now.
On Liverpool Street Station, there's a weighing machine above which you will find a chart indicating what should be the ideal weight for your height. And for the first time ever, I actually discovered I weigh precisely the correct amount, only I am 9.5 inches too small. As a result of this, I obviously have the alternative of going to a hat shop and purchasing some headgear which would bring me up to 6'7.5". Alternatively, investing substantial sums of money and going to a health resort where such manifestations as are exercised by massage, sauna, yoga, and probably yogurt as well would cause me to shrink in avoirdupois to such an extent where the...
Well, Clement Freud kept going with great style and panache to finish that round, gain an extra point. In fact, he started with the subject and finished with it, which is an achievement in itself. And he also brought the show to an end with a resounding, what can we call it? Fut. With great style. Clement, alas, you didn't finish in the lead, but you almost overtook our leader. Let me tell you that John Junkin and Kenneth Williams finished equally in third place, a little way behind Clement Freud, who was only 3 points behind this week's winner, who was Derek Nimmo. We hope you've enjoyed this edition of Just a Minute and will want to tune in again same time next week when we take to the air and we play this delightful and impossible game. Till then, from all of us here, goodbye.
The chairman of Just a Minute was Nicholas Parsons. The programme was devised by Ian Messiter and produced by Pete Atkin.
We present Kenneth Williams, Clement Freud, Derek Nimmo, and Peter Jones in Just a Minute. And as the minute waltz fades away, here to tell you about it is our chairman, Nicholas Parsons.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Hello, and welcome to Just a Minute. And as you've just heard, we have our 4 regular players of the game who are going to compete against each other as usual and try and speak for just a minute without hesitation, repetition, or deviation. Now, in the last series, many weeks ago, we changed, for fun, the order. And this week we thought we would change the flavour a little. And as Kenneth Williams regularly criticises me for the decisions I make as chairman, we're going to ask him to sit in my seat and see how he does. And I'm nobly...
how do you do? Thank you very much indeed, and welcome to Just a Minute, chaired by the one and only, the brilliant, the incomparable Kenneth, put him on the mantelpiece, Williams. And we begin with Nicholas Parsons, and the subject is Miller. Will you speak for 60 seconds on Miller, starting now?
The Miller that comes to my mind is a fellow called Andy Miller, who I met on Clydebank when I went up there at the beginning of the war to begin an apprenticeship as an engineer.
Question, which war?
The Boer War.
Well, you said it.
Look here, that wasn't a proper challenge. That wasn't a proper challenge, so Nicholas gets a point. Will you put a point down? And will you continue with the subject? You have 40 seconds. Will you continue with the subject of Miller for 40 seconds, starting now?
This fellow Miller was a pure Glaswegian from Clydebank, and when I arrived, he said,
What's the challenge now?
Repetition of Clydebank. We had Clydebank said twice, Mr. Chairman.
Oh, I'm afraid you did say it before, Nicholas.
I know, just because he interrupted me.
45 seconds remain? 45. 45 seconds remains for you on Miller, starting now.
Joe Miller wrote The Wits Barred in Macon.
What's the challenge?
Hesitation.
Hesitation, I'm afraid that was so. You get the subject back. A little less than 45 seconds on Miller, starting now.
Miller said to me, I've got to come up here. I said, right for you. You coming in the south here. I'm not got priority. I've got to me yourself. I've got to away with in Scotland. This is it. You're a sasser, not a prick, kind of moody. I know yous, but yous is an evil from a party. And this is very well. But come on, I've got to bring, I've got the doors, horns, my back. I got the horns. If you're not getting them there, you're not going to feel them behind you. And that's what's saying I'm bringing you. Can I preach a sheet is going to burn you? And that's why you can understand what I'm talking about.
There's been a challenge from Derek. What was your challenge?
A repetition of Ark.
Yes, well, I can't allow Ach, because after all, it was such a peculiarly involved dialect that I couldn't single out anything wrong there, so you have 20 seconds on the subject of Miller, starting now.
Miller is also the name of the man who grinds corn with those huge circular stones. It can be done in different ways as well.
Who's the challenge now?
Me.
What are you challenging on?
Hesitation.
Hesitation?
Yes.
Did you hesitate, Nicholas?
Yes.
Oh, you did? Very well. What's your question about that?
I want to show how generous and magnanimous I can be in spite of the way he treated me when he was the chairman of Just a Minute a long time ago.
Your behavior is most commendable. There's no question of that. It's very commendable. So the subject goes to Clement Freud, Miller, starting now.
I would like to say that the Miller to whom Nicholas Parsons was apprenticed in Clydebank has much to answer for. If ever a man had an opportunity of doing away with someone who has been a great bane in our lives.
Yeah, so who's winning? Oh, nobody's winning. No, the two in the lead are Nicholas and Clement. And the next subject is yours, Clement. Fun with snails, starting now.
If you want to have fun with snails, you need quite a lot of time in which to enjoy them. You ask a snail to climb up a lamppost and then go out for breakfast, lunch, dinner, and tea. And by the time you return, there's every hope that the illumination which I mentioned before and can therefore not say again will have been reached and climbed, at the top of which the snail...
I'm regretting this. He said climb before,
No,
and
he
then
said
climbed.
climbed.
Yes, it was climbed this time.
So he
and
didn't
climbed
know. Why are you
before.
challenging this? Silly. You're simply interrupting him, and
No.
he's doing so well. Go on, Clement, to continue with fun with snails as from now.
Maybe the greatest fun can be had by eating them, quite simply, sticking them in the oven with a lot of garlic and butter and parsley, and then getting a silver dish which could also be made of aluminium or other metals.
Who's challenged now? This is Peter Jones. Why are you challenged?
Because you can't have a silver dish which is also made
Which
of
can
aluminium and
also.
other metals. It wouldn't be a silver dish if it was.
The handles, he's pointed out, could be made of it. The handles. And
The handle's made of what?
He knows what he's talking about. The man is a culinary expert, you great now. You continue with the subject.
Well, what was he talking about?
The subject of fun with snails, starting now.
Escargots sont pleins d'humeur is the way the French would term fun with snails. Schnecken is the German expression for the word, and not very nice they are when you get them in Berlin, especially in Potsdam, where restaurants take great pride in serving you these foul, rubbery, chewing gum-like insects.
Very good. Yes, that put Clement Freud with those number of points commandingly in the lead, and the next subject goes to Peter Jones, and you must talk on the Blarney Stone for 60 seconds, starting now.
Well, last year I happened to be in Ireland, and I visited Cork, and some friends took me out to Blarney, which is a small town not very far away. Very disappointing, I thought. I didn't actually get to see the stone itself, which is the centerpiece, really, I suppose, of this place. It's a sort of magnet for all the people around, visitors, tourists, and whatnot. But it's full of rather boring shops with Donegal tweed and Waterford glass and things of that kind, Irish honey, whiskey, and so forth.
Where's the church?
I don't think there's anything boring about Waterford glass and Irish whiskey. I think they're very exciting and exotic things.
That may well be your opinion, but Peter Jones has another opinion and is entitled to express it. Right. You continue with the subject. You may find it boring, you may find it diverting, but you continue with the subject. You have just over 30 seconds for the Blarney Stone, starting now.
I was very disappointed because the main object of going there...
Comes from Derek, I'm afraid.
Repetition, sir, of disappointed, sir.
Did you say disappointed?
No, of course I didn't.
He was very disappointed when he saw the tower, and now he's very disappointed again just then.
Oh, well, I'm afraid, Peter, that's fair enough. Yes. Well, you have 25 seconds, Derek, for the Blarney Stone, starting now.
The Blarney Stone in Blarney Castle is, in fact, some 40 feet from the ground, and to actually kiss it, which was what you're supposed to do, needs to be quite athletic to...
A lot of buzzes there. It seemed to come from Clement Freud. I think Clement Freud was the first.
Hesitation.
Hesitation, yes, I'm afraid so. You have the subject. You will speak for 15 seconds on the Blarney Stone, starting now.
I've never quite understood why people wanted to kiss the Blarney Stone. They could hug it, they could take it out for tea.
Nicholas?
I don't think you could take the Blarney Stone out for tea. I don't think you could move it, and you certainly wouldn't enjoy the tea if you took it.
Yes, I think that's deviation.
Oh, what a marvellous chairman.
Yes, I think
Isn't
it's
he
deviation.
a wonderful chairman? Oh,
you have 12 seconds.
lack-a-day.
You have 12 seconds on the Blarney Stone, starting now.
Well, I remember when I was last in Ireland, they said you must kiss the Blarney Stone because all of us over here, we just know how to talk about it. That's the whole thing. If you've been over there to Cork and you've been down there, put your head under the thing. That's the thing.
Yes, well, some marks were achieved there, but I'm afraid Clement Freud still has a commanding lead. The subject now goes to Derek, calculators. Will you speak on that subject for 60 seconds? Calculators, starting now.
Well, I have a calculator, and I find it extraordinarly useful how you can persuade children to learn mathematics at school today when they can find all the answers they require, or nearly all they want, on one of these little machines. Because all you do is press a little button.
Yes, Clement Freud is...
Four alls.
All. There was 2 alls, yes. You have the subject calculators.
Does
45 seconds,
that mean
starting
it's a
now.
draw?
I am almost unique in having bought a calculator when it first came on the market at £75. And over the years it has become cheaper and ever less expensive until you may now pay something like 87p and get something which may not work very well, but my goodness, it is cheap. And I do...
A challenge from Nick, yes, Nick?
I thought he packed in then.
Yes, I agree. You have 25 seconds for calculators, starting now.
I understand that children can now take these into their examination classes.
Oh, a challenge from Clement.
You understand wrongly.
Oh, no, because my child has done it. And has been...
No, your child is a cheat. And I'm not surprised.
Your child is also too old to go to school.
He goes to college. He goes to college.
I know them both.
He was conceived during the Boer War.
The gestation period of the Parsons is long.
It doesn't matter if I'm on the panel or in the chair. They all have a go at me, don't they?
Yes, I think
people are walking out.
I think the challenge. I'm afraid.
Some are running.
Are you definitely? Have you definite knowledge about these things not being allowed at examination periods, Clement? I mean, have you real knowledge about this?
It depends on the examination.
I see. Then it's not a rule. There is not a general rule.
There's no general.
Then
if you're being examined for rheumatism, naturally you'll have to have a calculator.
Will you please not interrupt a very distinguished chairman? And
When's he
now
arriving?
We have 15 seconds. 15 seconds for you on calculator starting now.
And now, if you calculate who are the most important cult figures of our time, the first one who comes to mind is undoubtedly Kenneth Williams, our chairman this week, taken over my role. But to get back to the subject of children...
The subject is not children. You should get back to the subject
of children in calculators in schools, which is what I was talking about.
It's not what you said. You're lying.
No, he can get back to the... He can get back to the subject, you see, that he was on before. It doesn't necessarily have to be the subject on the card if it was in the course of his discourse.
He was talking about...
that. You now have 5 seconds on calculator starting now.
I think that...
Hesitation.
Hesitation. Did you hesitate, Nicholas?
No!
Oh, you didn't. Very well, then you have 4 seconds for calculator starting now.
Calculator should not...
Who is that challenging?
Hesitation.
Peter? Hesitation. Did you hesitate?
No!
Oh, well, I don't believe it then. Now you have 3 seconds on calculator starting now.
Calculators...
Hesitation.
There must be something in it if everybody thinks...
As we can hear. I think the trouble is that you're a big cult.
You have 2 seconds for calculator starting now.
Calculators are those little machines which you press the buttons.
Take no notice. Continue with the
Deviation.
subject. Yes?
Calculators.
There was a lot of mischief making then from the panel, and I don't want any more of it. Very, very, very naughty. And now the next subject. Yes, oh, I see. Nicholas has leapt into the lead. Oh, it's outrageous, isn't it? Got about 11 points. It's disgraceful. Nicholas, is your subject the Garden of Eden? 60 seconds starting now.
The Garden of Eden appears in the second...
Derek.
Mr. Chairman, why is he not speaking with a funny voice?
Derek, I must warn you, I'm in charge here. I will not allow this kind of levity.
Oh, sorry.
It's a disgrace.
Sorry, Mr. Chairman, I retract.
Now, you
He's
have 50
exhausted
seconds,
his repertoire.
55 seconds for the subject, the Garden of Eden, starting now.
The second book of Genesis refers to the Garden of Eden.
Clement Freud.
There isn't a second book of Genesis.
I see. What book is it?
The first book is a book of Genesis.
I see. That is fair enough. Therefore, you have 55 seconds for the subject of the Garden of Eden, starting now.
Brillat Savarin, who was a great French writer and philosopher, said, "O children of Eden, who gave it all up for an apple, what might they not have done for partridge stuffed with prunes macerated in brandy?" And I think I'll probably
a challenge
stop
from
there.
Nicholas. Why did you challenge?
Well, he stopped, actually, after
Yes, but he was provoked, you see. The pair of them on that side, I watched them. They were laughing and banging the table like a pair
I
of
wasn't
naughty,
laughing or banging
naughty
the table.
schoolboys.
They weren't
I've
banging
seen
the
better behaviour
table.
in the 6th. It's disgraceful. And you continue with the subject, Clement, starting now.
It was an absolutely terrific place, and there were 2 people who I think were called Adam and later Eve, conceived by someone whose name escapes me. And they had an enormously enjoyable time, first of all getting to know each other, and later going out into the world and begatting a substantial number of people.
Yes, Nicholas?
I don't think they begat a substantial number. I think it was just Cain and Abel. That's all that's recorded. I agreed. I've made a mistake.
Yes, but I mean,
about
he didn't mean they did it themselves. He mean that they were the source for masses of begetting.
He didn't
That's what
say
meant.
that.
And I'm
He
sure that's
didn't
what he meant.
say
He's nodding
that.
in agreement. And he keeps the subject.
They
He's
said
got
they
12
enjoyed
seconds
themselves,
on
and it was the
subject of
enjoyment of their
Garden Eden,
begatting that produced
and
Cain
he
and Abel.
starts now.
On the subject of begatting, which happened in the Garden of Eden, the Parsons family also went in for that sort of thing.
Nicholas?
Well, I haven't been in the Garden of Eden, and it was Derek's and Abbott during the Boer War I did my begatting. And,
So it's devious, then?
it's absolutely devious.
Right, you
yes.
have the subject, then 5 seconds on the subject of the Garden of Eden, starting now.
Why they gave this subject to me, I suppose, is because they think it's a Parsons one. And,
Very good. Very good indeed. Yes, I'm afraid your faces will all drop when I tell you that Nicholas Parsons is so much in the lead that not many of you have much of a chance. The next subject goes to Clement Freud. Will you speak for 6 seconds on the world's greatest picture, starting now?
The world's greatest picture is quite undoubtedly in the eyes of the beholder, and Kenneth Williams asked that self-same question, would presumably say it is a cult figure in Great Portland Street, known as Kenneth Williams, age
Yes, what is your challenge, Derek?
Repetition of Kenneth Williams.
Yes, I'm afraid
Far
so.
too
The
much
subject
Kenneth
goes to Derek. You have 45 seconds on the world's greatest picture starting now.
The world's greatest picture for me is, without doubt, E.T. Who has not been beguiled by that wonderful little monster? Gosh, it's fun, isn't it? Did you see him come down from the spaceship, get out, wander through the trees, and everybody's looking for him, man with keys hanging down his back, and there is this great picture.
Yes, I'm sorry. That was the challenge from Clement. What's your challenge?
Hesitation.
Hesitation. Oh, did you hesitate? Well, as they say, he who hesitates is lost, and you were lost there. So the subject goes to Clement, who had 25 seconds for the world's greatest picture, starting now.
A Star is Born is a picture which I was incredibly fond of, especially as it was made 3 times. The first time was Janet's game.
Yes, Nicholas.
3 times the first time.
Oh, yes.
One is singular, one is plural.
Yes,
Times
except
and
for-
time.
Yes,
Look, I haven't come all the way here from Great Portland Street to be insulted like this. I'm sitting in Kenneth Williams' chair
Yes.
playing this game.
Yes, that's all right. There's no need to remonstrate in that fashion. You have the subject, Nicholas, and you have 16 seconds on the world's greatest picture, starting now.
The world's greatest picture, as Clement Freud said, is in the eye of the beholder. To me, it must be the one that my little daughter did when she was 4 years of age, and I now have it framed in my office, and I look at it frequently. It depicts...
Challenge from Derek.
His daughter's, he said his little daughter, she's a great big lump.
I will not have this provocation. It's outrageous. It's outrageous. I mean, you wouldn't hear me coming out with a remark like that. It's disgraceful.
He's rude about every member of my family.
I will have people properly behaved. I believe in people behaving properly. I'm all for that. Yes, you know what I mean. So you keep the subject. You have 6 seconds for the world's greatest picture, starting now.
This picture has a little child on the edge.
Yes.
See, you get in
Clement
typically
Freud.
when you...
Repetition of little.
Yes, I'm afraid so. You have the subject. 4 seconds on the world's greatest picture, starting now.
Oh, I think...
Oh, yes. Yes, Peter, you're quite right. You have the subject. You have 3 seconds on the world's greatest picture, starting now.
Well, The Last Supper in Milan.
Repetition of well. He always starts with well.
Absolute rubbish.
He hasn't spoken.
I haven't spoken before.
No, but if he had, he still started with well.
Ah, well, I get an extra point, Mr. Chairman.
Cannot have a game on assumptions, Derek. He certainly gets a point. He gets a point for that. A wrong challenge. And you've half a second on the world's greatest picture, starting now.
Closed on Monday.
Very good indeed. At the end of that round, Nicholas has increased his lead. He's in 17 points, so closely followed by Clement Freud. And the next subject goes to Peter Jones, a good rebus, starting now.
Isn't that a kind of hieroglyphics game, like to be or whatever it is, Shakespeare, the way he had it, you know, the way it went? I don't want to repeat the first...
Yes,
No,
question of Derek's
He
challenge.
repeated the way.
Yes, I'm
instead
afraid
of
so.
to
You have
be.
the subject of a good rebus, starting now.
In the heraldic sense, a good rebus is a joke which is contained upon one's
No
escutcheon.
challenge from Nick.
I thought that was
I'm
hesitation.
afraid so. You have 45 seconds for a good rebus, starting now.
When I was in France last, this man came up with a good rebus. He says, on chante bibi son comme la voix. En chante bibi, en rebus, ça patron, ça remble, oui. Ah, père, pendant deux bichons, on se perd, on est plat, on chante pleuvoir. En faire que colère, c'est la paix, on est plat, on chante plus, on chante pleuvoir. En a fait,
challenge
on
from
est
Derek.
pleuvoir. Perdu, je dois vivre, on va se te faire, je te convainc, n'a pas
No.
on te fait, on est grave.
There's been a challenge from Derek.
Why
What
is
your
Nicholas Parsons continually allowed to audition? We come here and play the game. He comes here and audition.
You can only challenge for deviation or repetition.
And, well, repetition.
Yes, that was proven. You're quite right. And so you have 32 seconds on a good rebus, starting now.
A good rebus is something which we all like to read, isn't it? Because one picks it up and glances down on the page, and there you say, my goodness, a good... What's the matter now?
Nicholas, why is you challenge?
I don't like to read it.
No, it's not you. He's discussing himself.
He said we all like to read it. I don't.
Well, he
And
said
you've got
one,
half a second for the
actually.
good
Well, I'm
rebus,
not
starting
one.
now.
Something engine.
Very good indeed. I'm afraid that round has ensured a much greater lead for Derek, but it's still nowhere near Nicholas's. It's still very much a commanding lead. The next subject goes to Derek. Old ladies who help me across the road. Extraordinary subject.
Do you mean, when you say me,
Very-
Mr. Chairman, do
still
you
will
mean
accept-
yourself?
Are you...
When you say...
What did you say?
When you say me, do you mean yourself? You say, you want Derek to talk about these old ladies who help me
you
across the road.
It's written down here as old ladies.
Yes, I want you to interpret it for me.
Cross the road.
I want you to interpret it for me.
I'm not in
Please.
charge of the cards.
You can't explain, then, whether it is or not. I don't want Nicholas to get this, because he'll just give us his widow Twanky. I want to find out whether you mean me, yourself, or Derek.
I see your point. I'm afraid it evaded me before, but now it has all become crystal clear. Yes. Well,
for that, he's got his contact lenses in again.
I think you'll assume that it is me in a general sense for anyone that takes the subject. So, old ladies who help me across the road. Derek, starting now.
One of the sweetest old ladies that ever helped me across a road was called Denise Breyer. She is a most charming, handsome old lady. And
well, I have to challenge, don't I?
Yes, go on.
Because Denise Breyer is not an old lady.
I agree with you. We'll get the
She
subject.
must be. She's married to you.
And you have 50 seconds on old ladies who help me across the road, starting now.
The nicest old lady who ever helped me across the road was Mrs. Kettle. It was in the village of Swayfield near Grantham where I was born. And she was...
challenge from Derek.
That's not how they speak in Grantham. They have a very distinct Lincolnshire accent.
Yes, well, he'll get to that later on.
Oh, will he?
So you'll get 45 seconds for old ladies who help me across the road, starting now.
She had to be very careful because there were a lot of penny farthings and horses and carts on the road at the time.
Another challenge from Clement.
What's a hort and cart?
It's, you mean your challenge is what, deviation?
Deviation.
Yes.
In Lincolnshire, they call them horts and carts. They call them horts and carts in Lincolnshire.
Ladies who help me across the road, starting now.
My very favourite old lady who helped me across the road said, as long as you don't know Nicholas Parsons, I shall be very pleased to take your arm and escort you to the other side of the pavement. And I said that would be an enormous pleasure to me, especially as I was blind at the time. And so she gripped me, oddly enough, by the thigh, because I can't mention the other part of the body by which she held me previously, and avoided an awful lot of oncoming bicycles, motor cars, trucks, buses, and a tram which had come from a museum and was going on to a road show in a neighbouring village. When we reached...
Derek, why are you challenged?
A tram wouldn't go to a road show, it'd go to a rail show.
No.
I can quite conceive of a tram going to a road show, so keep going. You have 1 second on old ladies who help me across the road, starting now.
Agatha Palmer.
Very good indeed. He's done nothing to stop the commanding lead enjoyed by Nicholas Parsons. The rest are all trailing horribly, and it's his turn to speak next. You speak for 60 seconds on the subject of power, starting now.
Power to your elbow, a thing that Kenneth Williams often says, more power to this part of your anatomy. Power of the voice, power of speech, the authority that expressed in the power and the presence of a personality. If you produce this part of your vocal cords in the correct manner, you can reach the back of an auditorium. Right now, I am using my diaphragm here and sending the wind up, and it's vibrating against the soft palate, and it's coming out here forward through my teeth, and the power that is generated there is going forth to arouse this audience up to say, Parsons is the man with power. Here's another man with power sitting beside me. He exercises that in another house.
Challenge
and
from
over there...
Peter,
Repetition of man.
Man, yes, you have a subject then.
Well, he's
power,
not a woman,
and 20 seconds starting now.
Well, it can also mean the power that you switch on, which provides...
Challenge from Derek, yes?
Well, I just wanted to notice that he'd said well again. It's nice. I like sort of continuity on it.
Beautifully noted, but you get no points whatsoever. And the subject continues with Peter Jones, 16 seconds on power, starting now.
Without it, you wouldn't be able to operate your hairdryer.
Who's challenging now? Clement, what is it?
He didn't say well again. Deviation.
Yes. Very good. You get a point for a written challenge. You are amusing. And now you... subject of power, starting now.
Or your electric massager, which I know you use regularly before you leave the house, and to which you owe a great deal of your wonderful complexion, because it opens the pores and the power that is generated...
Splendid. Well, many thanks to Peter Jones for finishing in such tile at the end of just a minute, because we have come to the end of being able to play. Just a minute. The scores were as follows. Derek and Peter more or less in the lead. Clement very, very well with 90 points, but miles ahead of everyone else. Your winner this week, Nicholas Parsons.
Thank you. And I would like to say that I feel I owe it all to the warmth and generosity and the wonderful.
Don't knock it. You've done well. Don't knock it. And thank you very much. We hope you've enjoyed listening to Just a Minute and that you'll join us again next week when Just a Minute takes to the air once again.
The chairman of Just a Minute was Kenneth Williams. The programme was devised by Ian Messiter and produced by Pete Atkin.